Chapter 3045, The Demon's Decision, 7. It wasn't good for the students to be too smart. The professors wouldn't feel a sense of accomplishment. The poor old professor was having the same feeling now. After pondering for a long time, the old professor made up his mind and let Lung Ruoxue and the demon go home to self-study. He also instructed them to ask at any time if they had any questions. When she returned home, Lung Ruoxue stared at the thick stack of books in a daze. "Shuer, what's wrong?" The demon asked in confusion. "I feel like we've gone to university for nothing. We've studied on our own." Lung Ruoxue said gloomily, "It's okay. It's just getting into university. It's not troublesome for us." The demon didn't think so. He felt that as long as he could learn what he needed, it would be fine. Who cared if it was self-study or not? And he was currently quite satisfied with this learning method. In the blink of an eye, 2 years of university life passed. The number of times Lung Ruoxue and the demon came to the school could be counted with one's fingers. However, the two of them kept in contact with that depressed old professor. The old professor loved and hated these two students at the same time, and his feelings were extremely complicated. A year ago, Lung Qingtian and the others had also passed the college entrance examination and became students of Netherblue University. Although Lung Qingtian and the others had applied for different specializations, they all had one thing in common, and that was that they did not like to attend classes every day and preferred to self-study. Their actions made the professors in Netherblue University even more depressed. However, the professors couldn't do anything about it. After all, their results were there. Even if they were self-taught, they often took the top 3 in each major during the exam, which made the professors love and hate them. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest enjoyed such a life. In their eyes, a colorful campus could adjust their lives. Of course, if there weren't so many love-struck girls on campus, their little days would be even happier. Lung Qingtian and the others found joy in this, but Jikai and the beast couldn't. Originally, Jikai also wanted to get into a university for fun, but he had failed the college entrance exam twice in a row. This fact made him quite depressed. But luckily, the family members didn't have to go to school every day. This made the beasties feel a little more at ease. Just as Lung Ruoxue and the rest were enjoying their peaceful days, she suddenly received a red bomb, a wedding invitation. The owner of the wedding invitation was Chu Sun, who had appeared briefly 2 years ago. Looking at the red bomb in her hand, Lung Ruoxue could not understand. Hadn't the matter already been settled? Why did Chu Sun send her a wedding invitation? Could it be that he wanted to show off? Lung Ruoxue deeply felt that this was a possibility. Otherwise, there was no other way to explain the original intention of the other party sending her the wedding invitation. Just as Lung Ruoxue was hesitating on how to deal with this red bomb, Lung Qingtian and the others, who had already learned the truth from Qingju, decided unanimously that they would participate. This was also to clear Shui Er's name. Seeing that her grandfather and the rest were in high spirits, Lung Ruoxue could only go along with their wishes. On the day of the wedding, Lung Ruoxue was dressed in a red gown, which made her look even more beautiful and moving. The demon and the rest were all dressed in suits and leather shoes, looking extremely handsome. The beasties who were also attending the wedding had all combed their fur and feathers. Every little beastie's fur was smooth and shiny, and they were extremely cute. Thanks, why did they look like they were there to cause a scene? She believed that with these beautiful men around her, the groom would probably become a shadow of a man. Of course, at this moment, Lung Ruoxue had completely forgotten about her existence. And with their departure, not only would the groom become a decoration, even the bride would become invisible. As there were many people, Lung Ruoxue had specially instructed Jikai to rent 2 large buses that could carry 100 people. At first, Jikai didn't feel much about renting a big guest to attend the wedding. After all, they had more people, and the big guest was the cheapest. However, when Jikai saw the bus driver's conflicted expression, he realized that something was wrong. Wearing a suit and being a guest. Only people like them could think of such a thing, right? However, seeing that everyone was extremely calm, Jikai also calmed down. In any case, if it was really embarrassing, he would not be lonely. The bus driver, who was in a dilemma, drove the bus away with an unknown feeling. Chu Sen's wedding was arranged to be held at the Chu family's ancestral home. It was a place where the most powerful families on the planet gathered. When the two ordinary buses drove into this high-end, magnificent, and top-grade residential area, the dignitaries living there and the guests who came to attend the wedding were instantly horrified. Where did this guest come from? Why would a Volkswagen bus appear in this place? In fact, not only were the noble families unable to accept what they were seeing, even the bus driver almost couldn't bear it. The strange gazes from outside the car were like two sharp knives that pierced straight into the heart of the driver. This really wasn't a place they should be. The driver felt his face burning. Sensing the driver's uneasiness, Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and said, "Calm down. You guys aren't any worse than anyone else." Lung Ruoxue's words miraculously appeased the bus driver, who was a little anxious. After the bus driver had calmed down, he drove the bus into the temporary parking lot of the wedding banquet. The bus was surrounded by expensive and limited edition sports cars and caverns. The bus driver suddenly felt proud to be in the middle of those high-end cars. After all, not everyone had such an experience. The two buses were parked side by side. When the guests who had just arrived saw the bus stop in their dedicated parking lot, they immediately lost their calm. Very quickly, a staff member stepped forward to question the bus driver and arrogantly told him, "This is not a place for you to park." The chauffeur blinked his eyes innocently before turning to look at Lung Ruoxue. Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly and took out an admonishment card from her red pouch for the staff to take a look. Seeing the remonstration request, it was the staff member's turn to lose his calm. She had thought that these people had stopped at the wrong place. Who would have thought that they were really here to attend the wedding? The staff could not understand how a top family like the Chu family could have such a poor relative. The staff member, who was a little confused, had nothing to say after confirming the authenticity of the remonstration. Seeing him like this, the bus driver suddenly became more arrogant. Lung Ruoxue, who was sitting behind the driver, could not help but laugh to herself when she saw the driver's smug look. One should know that even if she were to dress up beautifully to ride on such a vehicle, she would not find it embarrassing at all. What was the big deal? This is called being unique, okay. Chapter 3046. The Demon's Decision. 8. When the door of the bus opened, Lung Ruoxue and the rest alighted elegantly. The indignant onlookers were once again dumbfounded. However, what made them even more dumbfounded was that one of the middle-aged men in a suit and leather shoes was actually holding a sack in his hand. It was bulging, and they had no idea what was inside. This image of the other party had once again refreshed their understanding of Lung Ruoxue and the rest. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were extremely calm, as if the matter had nothing to do with them. When a staff member heard this, he instantly felt wronged. He hadn't even said anything. Okay. However, Lung Ruoxue did not look at people's expressions when she was looking at them. Moreover, Green Vessel and Green Jade had already translated the thoughts of the staff members for her, so it was impossible for her not to know. All right, bring us to the wedding banquet. Lung Ruoxue didn't even give the staff a chance to speak and immediately gave her instructions. The staff member was helpless, but he could not just leave this group of people behind. Hence, he could only brace himself and lead the way for Lung Ruoxue and the others. When they arrived at the main entrance of the Chu family's ancestral residence, the person in charge of a 4S shop was standing at the door to welcome them. The moment he saw Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer, the corners of his mouth twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't understand why the two of them were here on the vice president's big day. He even brought a large group of people. What was he trying to do? Smash the place? The person in charge had already started imagining things. He would never have thought that Chu-san would actually send a remonstration request to Lung Ruoxue, and she would come to the banquet. The person in charge, who was in a dilemma, saw that Lung Ruoxue and the others were approaching and quickly went up to them. These two were not to be trifled with. Please don't cause any trouble on this joyous day. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the person in charge, who seemed to be on edge. She smiled charmingly and comforted him. Chu-san invited us to his wedding. Don't be afraid. We're not here to mess things up. We're not here to ask you to fix your car. Pucci, hearing this, Ji-kai couldn't help but laugh, while the person in charge's face turned red. Looking at the person in charge's constipated expression, Ji-kai comforted him kindly. Yes, don't be afraid. I've stopped getting into a car accident a long time ago. The person in charge didn't know what to say. He only felt that there were thousands of horses running wildly in his heart. Was this the main point? Was this the main point? Kiss. The person in charge was deeply regretful. Why did he take on the job of welcoming guests? He even met Lung Ruoxue and the others. Looking at the huge lineup of the other party, the person in charge changed the topic and asked, I wonder who they are? My family. Lung Ruoxue explained simply. Miss Lung has so many family members. The person in charge was speechless. Each of them was carrying a small animal. Was this the rhythm of a zoo? It's all right, this isn't all. Lung Ruoxue smiled indifferently. Instantly, the person in charge's polite words were stuck in his throat. After taking a few deep breaths, the person in charge continued, Please come in, Miss Lung and the others. Thanks. As he watched Lung Ruoxue and the others leave, he looked at the things in his hands and felt an indescribable pain in his balls. This gunny sack really didn't fit in with such an occasion. It was a pity that Lung Ruoxue and the rest did not care about that. After entering the Chu clan's residence and taking a casual look around, everyone lost interest in the Chu clan's ancestral residence. To be honest, in the human world, such a residence was indeed very attractive. However, Lung Ruoxue and the others were gods. What had he not seen? Therefore, to them, the Chu family was no different from an ordinary house. As such, they naturally did not dare to be interested. They found a corner and sat down, waiting for the wedding to begin. However, no matter how low profile they were, such a large group of handsome men and beautiful women was enough to dazzle the eyes of others. However, Lung Ruoxue and the rest had long gotten used to such worshipful gazes. Hence, they were rather calm. Meow meow. At this moment, the meowing of a cat entered the ears of Lung Ruoxue and the others. Lung Ruoxue could clearly feel a ball of fur by her feet. She lowered her head and saw a little female cat with a golden body snuggling up by her feet. Her light golden eyes were wide open as she looked at her with joy. Awa! Lung Ruoxue said softly as she looked at Song, who was in her arms with a dark expression. Meow meow. Awa was very happy that this beautiful sister still recognized it. When Lung Qingtian and the others heard Ahua's domineering name, they couldn't help but carefully size it up. Ahua was said to be Senior Song's pursuer, but unfortunately, it was taken away by its owner. Therefore, the two cats were not fated to meet, and looking at Senior Song's expression, it was obvious that he didn't want to have anything to do with the other party. Just as everyone was fantasizing, two meowing sounds were heard. Following that, Lung Ruoxue and the rest saw a black cat that was about the same size as Ahua appear in their line of sight. The moment the black cat saw Lung Ruoxue, it bared its teeth in an extremely unfriendly manner. Lung Ruoxue did not understand. She had not offended this cat. At this time, Ahua meowed at the black cat, and the black cat retracted its sharp teeth, but the expression on the cat's face was still quite unhappy. Sister, this little guy isn't being mean to you, Green Vessel explained with a smirk. What? Lung Ruoxue did not understand. Everyone looked at Qing Ju curiously. This black cat is Ahua's mate. Qing Ju explained with a smile. I see. Now what else did everyone not understand? At the same time, they all looked at Azure. Azure was so angry that all the fur on his body stood up. However, before he could get angry, he heard the black cat meow at him in warning, Stay away from my woman. Your sister. I'm not interested in your woman. The Azure beast roared twice to show that it was very unhappy. How detestable. If it wasn't for Nyo's rule that they couldn't speak human language in public, it would definitely teach this black cat a good lesson. Beast language. This was too painful. Chapter 3047, Graduation Internship 1. Then stay far away from my woman. The black cat shouted. Song calmly looked at Ah Hua and then at his own Yo. He was a little speechless. "I'm not close to your woman, at least at a safe distance." Ah Hua definitely wouldn't be able to pounce on him, so Tsang really felt that his innocence was still guaranteed. Unfortunately, the black cat didn't think so. It meowed angrily. "You shouldn't have appeared in the first place." When Azure heard this, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. "You think I want to appear? It's all because your Ah Hua's master sent an invitation to mine Yo. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother to come." After saying that, Song Huan arrogantly raised his fluffy little head, putting on a noble and cold expression. With Green Vessel's real-time translation, everyone could understand the interaction between Song and the black cat. However, this fact made everyone sigh. It seemed that no matter where and when, there would always be people who were jealous of each other. While watching the show, the crowd also expressed deep sympathy for the black cat on the Song bar. Then they looked at Ah Hua at the same time. They were very curious about how the little female cat would react in the face of the new and old love. Seeing that the black cat was so angry that it couldn't speak and its small body was panting, Ah Hua went forward and gently rubbed the black cat's small body and comforted it by meowing, "Ah hey, that's all in the past. Why are you still so calculative?" Hearing this, the black cat couldn't help but widen its round eyes. It wanted to roar at Ah Hua, but couldn't bear to, so it could only look at Song sullenly. In the face of the black cat's sudden grievance, Song's forehead couldn't help but be filled with black lines and secretly complained. Was this pretending to be pitiful? However, it was happy to see that Ah Hua was taken. After thinking about it, Song comforted, "Ah hey, right? Don't worry, I'm not interested in your Ah Hua. I'm here to attend the wedding with Neo, so you don't have to treat me as an enemy." Really, it was rare for Azure to be kind, but whether or not the other party would listen to him was none of his business. The black cat listened to Song's words and stared at Song for a long time. Finally, it meowed to Ah Hua, "Ah Hua, follow me." Although Ah Hua was reluctant to leave, it still gave the black cat face and walked away with elegant cat steps, looking back 3 times with each step. Looking at Ah Hua's reluctant eyes, Lung Qingtian and the others didn't know what to say. It was just an ordinary kitten, yet it had such rich feelings. Obviously, Song had already become a cinnabar in Ah Hua's heart. After this small interlude, Lung Roashue and the others fell silent for a moment. But luckily, the wedding was about to begin. The guests at Chu Sin's wedding were either rich or powerful. In order to match the Chu family's status, his wedding was naturally quite luxurious. As the wedding approached, the guests were invited into the Chu family's luxurious banquet hall. After Lung Roashue and the rest entered, they were led by the waiter to their seats. However, due to the large number of people, one table could not fit them at all. Therefore, under the dumbfounded gazes of the other guests, they filled a total of 10 tables. It was quite eye-catching for so many people to come from a family, and normally speaking, no family could bring so many people at once, even bringing at least one beast with them. The guests who felt that there was chaos in the luxurious banquet hall were quite annoyed, but since they were guests invited by the Chu family, they could not say anything no matter how dissatisfied they were. However, they secretly gave the Chu family's poor relatives the middle finger and were also dissatisfied with the Chu family. Thanks in reality, Chu-san did not know why he would invite Lung Roashue and the rest to attend the wedding. However, he did. More importantly, he did not expect Lung Roashue to be willing to come. She even brought so many family members and Beastie along. Even though Madame Chu was satisfied with Lung Roashue, she could not bring herself to be happy when she thought of her younger sister. It wasn't easy for his son to get rid of that person's shadow and was willing to find a woman to marry. But now, the wedding had provoked those people again. It was best if nothing happened to the wedding. Initially, Madame Chu did not agree to invite Lung Roashue and the others. However, her son insisted on inviting them. Under the circumstances where her repeated persuasion was ineffective, she could only agree. Besides, she was also hoping that the other party would not come. Who knew that she would still miscalculate? Now, Madame Chu's heart was at a loss. However, what was meant to come would come. When the auspicious time came, Madame Chu could not avoid it. As the host spoke, Madame Chu, the man's parent, braced herself and went on stage. Madame Chu, who was standing on the stage, did not dare to look around, afraid that she would meet Lung Ruoxu's eyes. In comparison, Chu Sun was much calmer. As Chu Sun led the bride into the banquet hall with the accompaniment of the wedding march, he saw Lung Ruoxu at first glance. It couldn't be helped. Lung Ruoxu's red dress was simply too dazzling. When he saw Lung Ruoxu, Chu Sun was still in a daze for a moment. If it wasn't for the best man behind him gently pushing him, he would have stopped in his tracks. The beautiful bride also felt that something was wrong with Chu's senator when she followed his gaze. She almost exploded. P and D and of one. Co. M to be more precise, he had seen photos of this woman and Chu Sun together. As the current one, she was always sensitive towards the ex of the person she loved. Especially when she saw Lung Ruoxu dressed in bright red. She instinctively felt that the other party was here to cause trouble. At the thought of this, the bride held Chu Sin's arm tightly and stood up straight in a show of force. Then, she raised her head and chest and deviated from the normal route, walking towards Lung Ruoxu's table. The wedding host was dumbfounded. What was going on? This didn't happen during the rehearsal? How could the bride add scenes without permission? Chu Sun was also a loss. He let the bride pull him as he walked closer to Lung Ruoxu. Towards Lung Ruoxu, Chu Sin's heart was complicated and tangled. Who asked this face to be exactly the same as his ex-girlfriend's? Moreover, even though he was the one who broke up with the other party's sister, he still felt a little anxious even now. It could be said that at the moment of the breakup, he really felt that the two of them were not suitable for each other and gave up the idea of changing the other party. However, after a period of separation, he still felt a little reluctant to part. This feeling was different from Ahua's. To Ahua, Song was the cinnabar in its heart that it could not get. On the other hand, Lung Ruoxu's sister, who looked exactly the same, was a treasure that he had once obtained but had no choice but to give up. Chapter 3048, Graduation Internship 2. It was precisely because of this tangled feeling in his heart that when the bride pulled him towards Lung Ruoxu's table, he actually didn't stop her. The best man and bridesmaid behind him wanted to stop them, but they were too slow. The young couple had already gone off track. The evil demon and the others didn't take it seriously at all when they saw the bride and the groom coming to their table. They didn't know much about the other party's wedding procedures and thought that it was normal. Only Lung Ruoxu was slightly surprised. However, she was very calm. The moment the bride arrived in front of Lung Ruoxu, she asked directly, "You're my husband's ex-girlfriend?" The scene was silent. Lung Ruoxu blinked, then blinked again. Was it all right to say this so directly? No, Lung Ruoxu said after a short pause. After hearing her words, the guests present suddenly recalled something and looked at Lung Ruoxu with a strange expression. Many people had long heard of Chu Sin's ex-girlfriend. After all, Chu Sin's fierce ex-girlfriend was too famous in the upper-class society. Of course, it was not a good reputation, but as time passed, they had almost forgotten about her existence. If the bride had not suddenly mentioned her today, they would not have even remembered her. But now, naturally, more people wanted to watch a good show. Im not. Even when the bride testified, Lung Ruoxu still denied it. What? Are you embarrassed? You actually don't dare to admit it. The bride was a little angry. She had to make the other party admit it. Otherwise, the other party's noble appearance in a gown, without saying a word, would make her lose. One had to know that today was her big day. How could she allow another woman to steal her limelight? With this thought in mind, the bride had to force Lung Ruoxu to admit it. Lung Ruoxu couldn't help but smile. That smile was like 100 flowers blooming, dazzling the eyes of everyone present. The bride was so angry that she was about to explode. She was indeed a vixen, only knowing how to seduce men. Lung Ruoxu, who knew what the other party was thinking, felt that she was being wronged. However, seeing that the other party was a bride, she still greeted him. Why wouldn't I dare to admit it? I'm really not your husband's ex-girlfriend. I can't just randomly admit to other men, right? Chu-san, what do you think? Lung Ruoxue then turned to Chu-san and asked. She really isn't. Chu-san, who had been in a daze, suddenly came back to his senses when he heard Lung Ruoxue's words. Why not? Do you need me to take out a photo of the two of you to compare? The bride said angrily. The person you're talking about is my sister. Lung Ruoxue, who knew that she could not count on Chu-san, continued. Younger sister? Who are you trying to fool? The bride did not believe Lung Ruoxue's words at first, but Lung Ruoxue expressed that she had tried her best. Not wanting to continue wrangling with the bride, Lung Ruoxue directly told Chu-san, Chu-san, settle your woman yourself. Fun, she really isn't. Hearing Lung Ruoxue's cold tone, Chu-san couldn't help but shiver as he hurriedly replied. What? You still want to hide it from me? You think I don't know? The bride, Fun, was stubborn, and no one could talk her out of it. Madame Chu quickly walked over and pulled the bride over. Fun, you got the wrong person. She and Ah Sin's ex-girlfriend are twin sisters. I've seen both of them. Thanks, but fortunately, the wedding finally went on as planned, and the wedding host also heaved a sigh of relief. Afraid that there would be any more accidents, the hosts of the wedding procedures sped up the process. Of course, this was also the Chu family's intention. After the entire process was over, it was the newlyweds' turn to toast. After toasting to many tables of brides, who had always been normal, they smoked again when they saw Lung Ruoxue and the rest eating their food gracefully. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue and the others were ignoring her, the bride was extremely unhappy. She directly snatched the wine bottle from the bridesmaid's hand and smashed it on the table. Then she shouted, I'm here to propose a toast. Upon hearing this and seeing the bride's bold and unrestrained behavior, all the guests present were a little confused. What was this? The guests couldn't understand. She already said that she wasn't your man's ex-girlfriend. Why was the bride still making a scene? It wasn't just the guests who didn't understand. Madame Chu didn't either. Madame Chu's expression was not very good. She could not understand why her noble and dignified daughter-in-law, who came from a prestigious family, treated Lung Ruoxue like her mortal enemy when she saw her. Didn't she already explain it clearly? As for Lung Ruoxue, when she saw the bride's provocation, she only smiled faintly and said, Are you going to give me a toast? Yes, do you dare to drink it? Fan asked loudly. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well and can't drink, but my man can drink in my place. Lung Ruoxue said with a smile. Then drink it. The bride, Fun, agreed. If you let's drink a bottle, shouldn't you drink a bottle too? Lung Ruoxue asked calmly. No problem. The bride nodded her head. Today, she was finally going against Lung Ruoxue. Fun, Chu-san couldn't help but stop her. However, Fun glared at Chu-san in anger. Don't you care? I want to drink with her. Yup, don't you care? Lung Ruoxue chuckled. Chu-san was very uneasy. He knew that these people in front of him were not to be trifled with. He really didn't want Fun to go against the other, but it was obvious he couldn't stop her. Seeing that Fun had already picked up a bottle, Chu-san thought for a moment before snatching the bottle from her and drinking it. A few minutes later, Chu-san's face was red after he finished the bottle of wine. Lung Qingtian stood up and patted Chu-san's shoulder. Young man, your alcohol tolerance is not bad. This old man will also give you a bottle. I raise a toast to you. When everyone heard this, they were once again in a state of confusion. They didn't know that a toast was the trend now. At this moment, there were already stars shining in front of Chu-san's eyes. However, when he saw Lung Qingtian, he still politely asked, And you are? I'm Shui Er's grandfather. Lung Qingtian said with a smile. So it's Grandpa. Come, drink. Chu-san said happily after hearing Lung Qingshan's self-introduction. Yes, drink. Lung Qingtian patted Chu-san's shoulder and played along. In a short while, Chu-san had another bottle of wine, and his face was even redder. Lung Qingtian, on the other hand, was unaffected. After finishing the bottle, he sat down calmly. Chapter 3049, Graduation Internship 3. Lung Ruhan then stood up. 10 minutes later, everyone at Lung Ruoxue's table, except for her, toasted a bottle to Chu's senator. Unfortunately, Chu's son collapsed heroically. The bride, Fun, paused at the sight before continuing to drink. The best men and bridesmaids felt a headache coming on. Since the groom was already drunk, the bride could not be drunk as well. Therefore, the job of drinking fell to the best man. The poor groomsmen fell down one by one under Lung Qing Tian and the others' continuous drinking. In the end, only the bride and bridesmaid were left. Seeing that the other party had the intention to continue drinking, the bridesmaids also wanted to get drunk. The bride, Fun, saw that the other party's alcohol tolerance was so good, and she couldn't even hold up to him. She felt embarrassed, so she made up her mind and went to drink. After a bottle of wine, the bride passed out. At this time, there were still many tables that had not been toasted. This fact made the bridesmaids feel a collective pain in the ass. After drinking a lot of hangover soup, the bride, groom, and best men were finally woken up, and the toasting process continued. The bride also felt the severity of the situation. After she woke up, she did not cause any more trouble for Lung Ruoxue and went to continue toasting. To Lung Ruoxue, if someone didn't offend her, she wouldn't take the initiative to offend them. Thus, she buried her head in the food she liked and didn't care about anything else. After she got pregnant, she became the king of her stomach. The Chu family's wedding banquet was not a low-end one, and many of the dishes were to her taste, so she ate happily. After a round of toasts, the bride, who was swaying as she walked, felt unhappy again when she saw Lung Ruoxue eating so happily. She went straight to Lung Ruoxue's table and shouted, "Let's continue drinking." Lung Ruoxue raised her head, feeling a little impatient. "Is there no end to this? Drink," Lung Ruoxue said helplessly, but she could not help but feel disgusted in her heart. Fun opened the bottle and started drinking. Lung Ruoxue and the rest did not say anything and just watched. After one bottle, the bride fell down again. "You still want to drink?" Looking at Chu's son, Lung Ruoxue raised her eyebrows and asked. "No, I'm not drinking anymore." Chu's son quickly waved his hand and hung up. Lung Ruoxue nodded and thought, "At least you know your place." However, even though Chu's son said he wasn't going to drink, he still stood by her side and didn't want to leave. This made her quite annoyed. Looking at Chu Sin's hesitant expression, Lung Ruoxue couldn't help but ask, "What's the matter?" He asked. No, Chu Sin said softly. "He's still standing?" Lung Ruoxue was speechless. After hesitating for a while, Chu Sun finally asked, "How is she?" "Who is it?" Lung Ruoxue played dumb. "Thanks, very good," he said. Lung Ruoxue replied simply. "Then I'm relieved." Chu San was a little disappointed. Live well with your wife. The past is in the past." Lung Ruoxue consoled him kindly. Chu San nodded. He wanted to lead a good life, but he would occasionally think about it. However, Lung Ruoxue was obviously not willing to continue this topic with him. She put on a look that kept strangers away and used her actions to chase him away. Chu San was still tactful. He knew that Lung Ruoxue did not like to talk to him anymore, so he did not continue to annoy her and turned to leave. The best men naturally left with Chu's senator. However, most of these best men were Chu Sin's good friends. Hence, they were very curious about Lung Ruoxue, who looked exactly like Chu Sin's ex-girlfriend. No one could understand why Chu San didn't like such a beautiful and noble woman. But that vulgar woman? I heard that the sisters' names are very similar, but their personalities are different. It's really amazing. With a trace of curiosity towards Lung Ruoxue, the groomsmen couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. Instantly, the demon was unhappy. Was his woman for others to see? The cold air around him was released slightly, and everyone present could clearly feel that the temperature in the room had dropped a lot. However, no one would have thought that the main culprit of the drop in temperature was a demon. Chu Sin's wedding finally ended. Madame Chu, who had been breaking out in cold sweat, could finally heave a sigh of relief. Lung Ruoxue and the rest had also become the focus of the wedding. Of course, what everyone talked about the most was still their unique mode of transportation, the bus. After that, the bus really became popular. When the crowd saw Lung Ruoxue and the rest wearing formal attire, and sitting on the big guests in a surprisingly harmonious manner. They couldn't help but try it out as well. However, they naturally wouldn't take an ordinary bus. Hence, many famous RV1 companies received orders for buses. It was naturally happy to have business, but the bus business was quite a pain in the ass for those famous RV companies. This was not their specialty. When Lung Ruoxue heard this news, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. However, she also had something to worry about. After the wedding, the bride went crazy and actually pestered her, sparing no effort to invite her to tea. What kind of tea is that? Are they close to you? Lung Ruoxue kept finding excuses to reject her, but it only made the bride fun braver and braver. In the end, Lung Ruoxue had no choice but to agree to the other party's invitation. Sitting in a high-class restaurant, Lung Ruoxue and Fin stared at each other in dismay. The demon and Chu Sun, who were sitting at the side, did not say a word. The demon didn't want to say anything, but Chu Sun didn't know what to say. Earlier on, Lung Ruoxue had already warned him to keep an eye on his wife. Unfortunately, his wife did not listen to him and insisted on treating her to a meal and chatting. He was rather helpless about this. Yes, Fin's tea had turned into dinner, and it was Western food. Not only that, she even took the initiative to order food for Lung Ruoxue and her husband. Chu Sen's face reddened at Fin's actions, but he couldn't do anything about Fin's insistence. In reality, Fin acted on her own initiative because she didn't believe Lung Ruoxue's words. She felt that the other party was lying to her, and that Lung Ruoxue was Chu Sen's ex-girlfriend. Thus, her series of actions were all to test and verify. Lung Ruoxue understood Fin's thoughts, so she didn't expose her. She felt that since the other party didn't believe her, she would just let her verify it. Her only hope was that the other party would stop pestering her after the verification. She really didn't want to deal with such a willful woman. Chapter 3050. The Extraordinary Principle. 1. After the dishes were served, Lung Ruoxue and the demon ate their food elegantly, causing Fin's eyes to widen. The table manners of these two were too standard, even better than those of the so-called nobles. Fin felt inferior as she looked at herself. Fin watched in a daze as Lung Ruoxue and the demon finished their dishes one after another. She didn't have any appetite at all. She was too defeated. Fin suffered a huge blow, but she still didn't give up on testing Lung Ruoxue. After the meal, Fin suggested a movie. P&D and Ov1. After Fin's series of tests, Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer's performance was impeccable. In the end, Fin finally gave up. After settling Fun, Lung Ruoxue and the others' lives went back to normal. 2 years later, Lung Ruoxue and Monster University had graduated. Initially, the medical course required 7 years of study. However, the two of them had self-studied too quickly and completed their studies in 4 years. This made the old professor, who had both loved and hated Lung Ruoxue and the demon, love and hate even more. Of course, what he did not know was that they had deliberately slowed down their graduation speed. Otherwise, the two of them would have graduated in less than 2 years. After they graduated, the old professor arranged for the two of them to do an internship in the largest hospital. Initially, the two of them didn't want to go, but when they heard that they didn't want to do an internship, the old professor wanted to cry in front of them. Helpless, Lung Ruoxue and the demon could only agree. However, they had also discussed the conditions with the old professor. They could do an internship, but the working hours and content would be up to their mood. The old professor would have flown into a rage if someone else had made such a request. However, the other party was his beloved disciple, and he knew how slow they were, so he didn't dare to refuse. Just like that, Lung Ruoxue and the demon became interns at the largest hospital on planet Indigo. Of course, it was just a name. On the day they entered the hospital for their internship, both of them had already discussed with the hospital director that they would only be doing it in name. They would not be on duty and would not see any patients. When the director heard what the two of them said, he was stunned for a long time and could not come back to his senses. These two could be considered as his juniors. In recent years, There were very few students who could graduate from the medical school of Netherblue University. He had been looking forward to it and had finally gotten 2 interns through the back door of the old professor. But what did these 2 tell him? Not working? Not seeing patients? Then wouldn't his efforts be in vain? Although his hospital was the largest on planet Indigo, it was a public hospital, so the treatment of the doctors was not the best on the entire planet. Therefore, in order to snatch 2 doctors from him, he had offended many colleagues. Now, the 2 doctors he had snatched over with great difficulty were telling him that they were not on duty and did not see patients. This would definitely not work. After being depressed for a long time, the director couldn't help but ask, "I can understand that you don't want to work, but if you don't want to see a doctor, why are you studying medicine?" "I learned it from my husband," Lung Roashua said with a smile. "I'm here to help my wife deliver a baby," the demon said. This was the first time the director had heard of such a thing. The old professor had not told him about this situation, so he was stunned again. While he was still in a daze, Lung Roashua and the demon took the opportunity to slip out of the director's office and return home. When the dean finally came back to his senses, the 2 cunning juniors had long disappeared. Thanks no. He had to find them. After asking the old professor where Lung Roashua and the evildoer lived, the dean had personally come to visit. This was the first time he had come to Lung Roashua and the demon's residence. The dean, who had originally wanted to be calm and composed, was actually quite calm at the start. However, when he saw that other than Lung Roashua and the demon, the entire family was filled with handsome men and beautiful women, he could no longer remain calm. "Look at how she's grown." All of them were so handsome that one couldn't take their eyes off them. After that, he saw that the house was filled with all kinds of beasts, and it became even more chaotic. The director, who deeply suspected that he was in a zoo, didn't know how to react for a moment. However, seeing the beasts and humans getting along so well, he also felt that it was quite magical. One had to know that these beasts were all raised by others. Other than the beautiful red macaw, there's also a white tiger. Not only that, but the tiger also lived with the rabbit and the cat. This was really unbelievable. Don't tigers want to eat rabbits and cats? It could be said that the director's curiosity had been completely piqued. Even at this moment, he had forgotten his purpose for coming here, his eyes only staring at the beasts without blinking. The director looked at the beasts while Lung Roashua and the rest stared at the director. Song, who already knew the dean's thoughts, felt a deep disdain for this half-grown old man's thoughts. TSK, would a tiger dare to eat it? He's got guts. Who knew would eat who? Thinking of this, Song couldn't help snorting coldly. He glanced at Baisu with a dangerous gaze, which immediately made Baizu's hair stand on end. If it sensed danger, how could it break through? Baisu glanced at it from the corner of his eye and lowered his head again. His small body couldn't help but move closer to Lung Qingshan's feet. With Master's grandfather around, that cat probably wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous. However, it could clearly feel that the old man's gaze made the cat unhappy. Baisu silently glared at the dean and moved to Lung Qingshan's side. At the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief. He was finally safe. The director had no idea why the white tiger cub was suddenly glaring at him, and he was completely baffled. However, out of his love for cute little beasts, he couldn't help but pick up a rabbit. In reality, he wanted to hug the little white tiger more, but the little white tiger didn't seem to be very friendly to him. So after thinking for a long time, he still didn't dare to make a move and picked a safe beastie to hug. Unfortunately, rabbits weren't for anyone to hug. So just as he picked up the rabbit, a certain extremely displeased rabbit stretched out its paw and scratched him. In an instant, a few claw marks appeared on the director's hand. "Arg, I've been scratched." Immediately, a shrill scream was heard. A certain rabbit took the opportunity to jump out of the headmaster's palm. The director, who was being scratched, raised his head to look at Lung Roashua and the demon, feeling wronged. He repeated, "I've been scratched." Why didn't his juniors have any reaction when they saw him being scratched? It really broke his heart. Is there still love between classmates? "Yes, I saw it." Lung Roashua nodded. "Junior, I was scratched by your rabbit. You have to take responsibility." The director took the opportunity to say. Chapter 3051. Headmaster Chi Xiong. 2. What responsibility? Lung Ruo Xue play dumb. I've been scratched. The director emphasized. I saw it. It's not a serious injury. It'll be fine in 2 days. Lung Ruo Xue smiled. How can it not be heavy? You're also a medical student, so you should know how serious it is to be bitten by a beast. If there's a rabies virus, you'll die. The director said with tears in his eyes. Don't worry, you won't die. Lung Ruo Xue was speechless. It doesn't matter if I can die or not. I was scratched by your rabbit, so you have to be responsible for me. The dean said like a rascal. All right, I'll pay for your injection. Lung Ruo Xue said helplessly. Although she really wanted to say that her rabbit wasn't sick, she could tell that the director wouldn't believe her. So, she couldn't be bothered to say it. After all, an injection didn't cost much. No. When the director heard this, he immediately objected strongly. No. So, I don't need a report? Lung Ruo Xue said with a smile. I can afford the injection, but your rabbit scratched me and hurt me physically and mentally, so you have to compensate me for the emotional damage, or I'm not done with you. The director said angrily, but in his heart, he couldn't help but praise his own wit. He didn't believe that, with his intelligence, he couldn't get these 2 little guys who he loved and hated back to the hospital. It was the director's good idea to use the scratch to get Lung Ruo Xue and the demon to work in the hospital. What a pity. He had calculated the wrong person. How much do you want? Lung Ruo Xue asked curiously after hearing the headmaster's words. I don't want money. I just want you to go back to work at the hospital. The director stated his purpose. I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Lung Ruo Xue rejected. She had long seen through the principal's ill intentions. It was a pity that the other party was destined to fail. This was because neither she nor the demon would obediently go to the hospital for an internship. This was also the condition that they had discussed with the old professor back then. Otherwise, they would not have agreed. Why not? Your rabbit scratched me. Shouldn't you compensate me? The dean said with a face full of grief and indignation. How detestable! How detestable! How could this girl be so detestable? He was clearly trying to renege on his debt. No, he would not allow such a thing to happen. The director made up his mind. Even if he had to go back on his word, he had to get these 2 guys back to the hospital. Moreover, he had made a bet with the old professor because the old professor had reminded him before he came that he couldn't force these 2 little guys and he couldn't put on the airs of a dean. Otherwise, he would definitely not be able to achieve his goal. Before he came, he had thought of countless plans. The only thing he did not expect was to be scratched by Lung Ruo Xue's rabbit. However, this seemed to be an opportunity given to him by the heavens, so he decided to seize it. But now, he had seized the opportunity. However, Lung Ruo Xue did not seem to want to take responsibility, nor did she feel guilty. How was he going to resolve this? But when the dean heard this, he immediately exploded. Saved? In your dreams. I don't want money, but I want people. You and your man will have to go back to the hospital tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm not done with you. The director shouted at the top of his voice. I'm not going back. Lung Ruo Xue's red lips parted slightly, spitting out 2 words that were enough to make the dean vomit blood. The dean was about to explode from anger. He glared with fire spewing out his eyes and said, I have to. This is the compensation you're giving me. This is the compensation you asked for, but I have the right to refuse. Lung Ruo Xue said, refusing to budge. Thanks, Sumi. Where should we go? Lung Ruo Xue asked out of curiosity. I'll sue you in court. The director was stunned by Lung Ruo Xue's words and only spoke after he regained his senses. All right, go ahead and sue. But may I ask, Mr. Director, what is my crime? Lung Ruo Xue asked with a smile. The crime is not compensating my mental loss. The director thought for a moment and said. Upon hearing this, Lung Qingtian and the others couldn't help but laugh. This crime was too ridiculous. Seeing that someone was laughing at him, the dean's face flushed red as he roared. What are you laughing at? It's like this. Yes, Director. You're welcome to sue. You'll get a lawyer to wait for you. Lung Ruo Xue said with a smile. Why are you still hiring a lawyer? I'm a law student. At this moment, Lung Ruhan spoke. Upon hearing this, the director was a little dumbfounded. Wasn't she afraid of him suing her? How did this happen? I didn't scare him. The director was worried. Why was this little girl so difficult to deal with? Actually, before the dean came, the old professor had only told him about the conditions that Lung Ruoshue and the demon had proposed. He had not told him about his junior's personality. Otherwise, he would never have come up with such a terrible idea. Now, he was in a difficult position. The heartbroken director looked at Lung Ruhan with sorrow and resentment. His eyes were full of accusations. Lung Ruhan felt so wronged. He only wanted to help his sister save some money and had no other thoughts. However, this dean seemed to hate him, but he was not afraid. Lung Ruhan, who did not take it seriously at all, picked up the teacup and sipped her tea leisurely. She did not even look at the director. Lung Ruoshue didn't bother with the director anymore. She could do whatever she wanted with this unreasonable old man. With that thought in mind, Lung Ruoshue immediately pulled the evildoer upstairs to rest. A pregnant woman can't afford to be hurt. I'm always sleepy. Lung Ruoshue had not forgotten that she was pregnant. Hence, she would not shortchange herself. Seeing that Lung Ruoshue and the demon had returned to their rooms, Lung Qingtian and the rest exchanged glances and followed them upstairs. In an instant, only the lonely headmaster and Ji Kai were left in the large living room. Of course, there were also the spirit beasts. The headmaster, who could only stare at Ji Kai and the other beasties, was dumbfounded. What was going on? Why did they all leave? He was a guest. Was it okay to leave the guest in the living room and go back to her room? The director couldn't accept this fact, but he was interrupted by Ji Kai just as he said 2 words. Director, do you really want to sue my master and his wife? Ji Kai said helplessly. Of course. The director braced himself and said, then you should go back and prepare. Don't waste any more time. Ji Kai asked him to leave. After sending this guy away, he could go back and take a nap. The dean didn't want to leave just like that. He hadn't even achieved his goal yet. Moreover, what was there to sue? Who would complain to the court after being scratched by a rabbit? He just wanted to scare the little girl. But the current situation was obviously different from what he had imagined. Chapter 3052. Headmaster Qi Xiang, 3. The dean felt even more worried. He couldn't help but glance at Ji Kai, but Ji Kai didn't look at him. He even turned his head to the other side. In the end, Bai Su couldn't stand it anymore and walked directly to the dean, brandishing his sharp claws and threatening him. The director's heart started to beat wildly as he looked at the white tiger cub's unkind gaze and expression. However, as an adult, he would never be frightened by a white tiger cub. Seeing that he didn't scare the other party, Bai Su roared a few more times, then opened his mouth wide and bit at the dean. This time, the dean was greatly shocked and ran away. Bai Su chased after the director relentlessly until he reached the gate before he stopped. At this time, the director had already escaped from the courtyard. Seeing that the white tiger cub didn't chase after him, the director finally relaxed. However, he could clearly feel that the expression on the little white tiger's face seemed to be mocking him. That's impossible, right? The other party was only a tiger? How could he make a mocking expression like a human? The director deeply felt that his eyes were playing tricks on him. This was absolutely impossible. Although he did not complete his task of persuading the white tiger to surrender today, the director was still scared when he saw the little white tiger guarding the door with a faint smile. He didn't dare to go in again and turned back every 3 steps, leaving reluctantly. Only when the director's figure was out of sight did Bai Su turn around and return to the living room with relief. After the dean left, he gave himself an injection and then went to find the old professor. The old professor looked at his dejected student with an expression of understanding. Fail, the old professor said indifferently. Today is only the first day. I won't give up so easily. I believe that I'll be able to convince those 2 little fellows in time. The director, who had been depressed for a while, suddenly clenched his fists and said, as if he had been injected with chicken blood, "Then I'll wish you good luck." The old professor said disapprovingly. It had been 4 years, but he had not been able to change the young couple's mind. Therefore, he believed that if he could not do it, no one else would be able to. However, the dean obviously didn't think so, so the old professor could only helplessly let him do as he pleased. The dean was also the type of person who became braver the more he was defeated. After collecting some information on Lung Ruoxiu and the demon from the old professor, he left and went back to think about a battle plan. It was clear that he had already treated Lung Ruoxiu and the evildoer as two tough bones to chew. He was determined to conquer these two bones. Otherwise, he wouldn't stop. The next day, the director came to visit again. Upon seeing him, Lung Ruoxiu immediately asked, "Director, are you here to give me a court summons? I hope that we can resolve this in private." The hospital director said after a moment of silence, "Oh, then how do you want to resolve it? I can consider all the other conditions except for an internship in the hospital." Lung Ruoxiu laughed. "Thanks, I'm sorry. I can't agree to this request. I've already told the professor that the working hours and content are up to our mood, so we can go to the hospital whenever we want." Lung Ruoxiu made her words very clear. "Even so, you can't just skip it for a day," the headmaster said with a bitter face. He had been so worried about Lung Ruoxiu and the demon for the past 2 days that his hair had turned white. "Why can't I?" Lung Ruoxiu blinked her innocent eyes and pretended to be confused. As a doctor, other than having a solid foundation in theoretical knowledge, what's more important is practice. You've studied for 4 years, but you only have theory, but you haven't come into contact with practice at all. You can only become a real doctor after an internship. The director persuaded him with all his heart. "We don't need practice. Theory is enough." The demon said, "It's not enough. Theory is definitely not enough. Junior, aren't you going to give birth to a baby for your junior in the future? If there was no practice, how could they deal with unexpected situations? You have to know that it's extremely dangerous for a pregnant woman to give birth. And if there's a slight mishap, it's possible for 1 person to die and 2 lives to be lost. Have you thought about all this?" The director roared with a face full of disappointment. The evildoer had never thought of these. After hearing the headmaster's words, the evildoer turned to look at Lung Ruoxiu and asked softly, "Honey, do we need practice?" "I don't need," Lung Ruoxiu said with certainty. They were gods, and situations that ordinary people would encounter would not happen to them. Hence, there was no need to worry. "Lung Ruoxiu, how can you joke around with your own body?" After hearing Lung Ruoxiu's words, the director was infuriated again. When Lung Ruoxiu heard this, she smiled calmly and said, "Director, how could I joke about my body? We really don't need practice." Seeing how resolute Lung Ruoxiu was in her words, the director couldn't help but say angrily, "You've been studying medicine for 4 years. Are you really going to waste it like this? It's not to the extent of being wasted, but it will still be useful in the future." Lung Ruoxiu's smile was very rippling, but the dean did not want to see Lung Ruoxiu smile at all. It was too piercing, wasn't it? Furthermore, he was even angrier that Lung Ruoxiu did not take her own body seriously. "You guys also think that they don't need any practice?" Seeing that he couldn't convince Lung Ruoxiu and the demon, the dean turned his attention to Lung Qingtian and the others. Lung Ruoxiu's grandfather and brother were here, so they should be worried. Who knew that after he asked this question, Lung Qingtian and the others would shake their heads in unison. Instantly, the dean was so angry that he couldn't speak. After adjusting his mood with much difficulty, he still wanted to persuade others. However, Lung Qingtian and the others didn't give him the chance. Under the dean's dumbfounded gaze, they all turned around and went upstairs. The headmaster was dumbfounded. Lung Ruoxiu looked at the headmaster with sympathy and said honestly, "Director, don't waste your effort. I'm the head of the family." In other words, no one could convince her. Upon hearing this, the director's worry intensified. This time, there was no need for Baisu to chase and bite him. The director left on his own like a walking corpse. For the next few days, the director did not appear, causing Lung Ruoxiu to think that the other party had already given up. She was also happy to stay at home to nurse her pregnancy. Half a month later, the dean, who had disappeared for a period of time, came to visit again. This time, he didn't waste any words. The moment he saw Lung Ruoxue, he immediately burst into tears. That sharp cry frightened everyone in the villa. The crowd and the beasties all looked at the headmaster in horror, very much wanting to know what he was up to. However, with a tacit understanding, the crowd and the beasts did not speak first. After crying for a while, the headmaster saw that no one was paying attention to him and stopped crying. He choked out, "You guys are really too unsympathetic. I'm crying so miserably and no one actually cares about me." Chapter 3053. Lung Ruhan's Peach Blossom 1. "I'm sorry, we're not close to you," Lung Ruhan hurriedly said after hearing this. "Can't you care if you're not close? How can you do this?" The dean said angrily. "Of course I don't dare to care. What if you cling to us?" Lung Ruhan said matter-of-factly. Seeing the other party being so direct, the dean couldn't help but secretly think, "I just want to rely on you. You cunning guys." It was really too detestable. He had not shown himself for the past half a month. In fact, he had been thinking of a countermeasure. After thinking about it, in addition to his initial understanding of Lung Ruoxue and the evildoer, he truly felt that since the hard approach did not work, he should use the soft approach and pretend to be pitiful. However, this act of pity didn't seem to move them. This group of cold-blooded animals. The dean felt indignant. He had already visited the thatched cottage, no, the villa, 3 times. How could they not be moved? When he thought of this, the director was really sad. In the end, the director made up his mind and roared. "Lung Ruoxue, Yechin, I'll ask you for the last time. Are you going to do your internship in the hospital?" "I'm not going." Lung Ruoxue's will was firm. "You're not going? If you don't go, I'll ill." The director stammered, not even able to complete his sentence. How naive. He was too naive. "He'll die for you to see," the hospital director said ruthlessly. Do you have to do this?" Lung Qingtian couldn't take the director's threat. Wasn't this dean a little too weird? Why did he have to make Shui, and her husband go to the hospital? Lung Qingtian could not understand. However, when Lung Ruoxue heard the headmaster's threat, she could not help but laugh. "Director, you're not anyone to me. Don't you think it's ridiculous to threaten me with death? Laughable. Are you really not going to help?" The hospital director felt uneasy. "Congratulations, you're right." Lung Ruoxue nodded. When the headmaster heard this, he stared at Lung Ruoxue's beautiful eyes, wanting to see if she was forcing herself. However, after looking for a while, he realized that this little girl's eyes were clear and she was obviously serious. For a moment, the dean was in a difficult position again. After hesitating for a while, the director decided to take a gamble. So in the next moment, he directly crashed into the snow-white wall. Lung Qingtian took a look. What would happen if they really bumped into this? In a flash, Lung Qingtian grabbed the director by his collar and said with a speechless expression, "This dean, even if you really want to die, don't die in my house. Don't you know that this is very unlucky?" These people were truly cold-blooded and heartless. Thanks he had been the dean for more than 10 years, and he was considered a person of status and position on the Indigo planet. But now, how could he be forced to this point by these 2 little fellows? Although everything he did was to achieve his goal, it was obvious that he would not be affected by force or persuasion. While the dean was feeling depressed, Lung Ruoxue had already made a call to the old professor. She only said that the dean wanted to commit suicide, and the old professor only heard a beeping sound. Half an hour later, the old professor arrived. First, he scolded the dean. Then, the old professor took the dean away. Lung Ruoxue's side finally had some peace. Without the weirdo, the director, Lung Ruoxue and the others could do whatever they wanted. After the dean was taken away by the old professor, he unwillingly followed the old professor home. When they arrived at the old professor's house, the old professor looked at the dean and couldn't help but curse. "Do you have a pig brain? You actually want to commit suicide?" "Professor, I'm just scaring the 2 kids. I'm not really going to die," the hospital director said with an embarrassed yet ingratiating smile. "Idiot, you don't have any relationship with them, so why would they care if you die or not?" The old professor was really disappointed. The dean was in his 40s this year, which was the prime age for him to do his work. The old professor had thought highly of him, but now he deeply felt that his student's IQ was really lacking. There should be some sympathy. The hospital director could not help but whisper, "There is, my ass. If that pair of cold-blooded little fellows had sympathy, I would have long succeeded. You don't know. In the past 4 years, I've been fighting with those two little things many times. I've even used all kinds of cute and pitiful acts, but it's useless. Those two little things still care about me and don't put me in their eyes at all. They're already like this to me, let alone you. How many days have you known them? You want to settle them? Keep dreaming." The old professor roared. This roar also spoke the words in his heart. In fact, he was still quite balanced in his heart about the dean's defeat. Otherwise, if a certain dean had succeeded in one go, he would be depressed to death. And these thoughts in his heart also caused the dean to be dumbstruck. So that's how it is. No wonder the teacher wanted to bet with him. So the teacher was not optimistic about him at all. For a moment, the director was filled with grief and indignation. He was indignant because the professor knew the character of the two little guys, but he still tricked him into making a bet. Wasn't this clearly a trap? The dean looked at the old professor with a resentful gaze, which made the old professor feel a little guilty. However, the old professor still thickened his skin and said, "There's no point in you looking at me. I can't handle those two little guys. Otherwise, I wouldn't have agreed to their conditions. Is there really no other way?" The director asked worriedly. "I have no choice," the old professor said in a desperate manner. "AI, if you really can't do it, just give up." After a pause, the old professor continued. In any case, he didn't have any hope for the two little guys. When the director heard this, he was very reluctant. Those two little guys had very good aptitudes, and out of love for talent, he was really unwilling to give up just like that. However, he had used both soft and hard tactics and thought of all the possible solutions, but his juniors just wouldn't budge. This made him so worried that his hair turned white. After thinking for a long time, the director finally decided, "I still want to try. If you don't want to give up, then try it. But don't threaten her with suicide anymore. It's useless," the old professor warned. "I want tea," the director said, a little embarrassed. Committing suicide had almost become a disgrace to him. Sob. It was a stain that could not be washed away. After a long talk with the old professor, the dean returned home. The hospital director's wife was very surprised to see her husband in low spirits when she returned home. After asking, the madam couldn't help but laugh. The director was a little angry and glared at his wife, who was gloating over his misfortune. The hospital director's wife coughed a few times in embarrassment before she whispered something into her husband's ear. Chapter 3054. Lung Ruhan's Peach Blossom 2. Immediately, the director's eyes lit up. The director looked at his wife excitedly and said, "Madam, you really are my think tank. Why didn't I think of that before? You're too thick-hearted. We women are the best at socializing." The hospital director's wife said with a little pride, "Yes, madam, I'll leave Lung Ruashua to you. You must find a way to get her for me." The dean's eyes sparkled. "Don't worry, you'll do my best," the hospital director's wife promised. The next day, the hospital director's wife personally came to visit. When Lung Ruashua, who was in the living room with her grandfather and the rest, heard that a beautiful middle-aged woman wanted to see her, she was astonished. Other than Madame Chu, she did not know any other middle-aged women. However, she still asked Ji Kai to invite him in. The hospital director's wife entered the room. When she saw Lung Ruashua for the first time, she was so stunned that she did not say anything for a long time. When she finally regained her senses and looked at the other people, she continued to be in a daze. The hospital director's wife only recovered after a long time. At the same time, she couldn't help but complain in her heart. Why didn't her husband tell her that this little girl was so devastatingly beautiful? She wasn't prepared for this at all, and now she had lost her composure. The hospital director's wife looked at Lung Ruashua with some hidden bitterness. She introduced herself and made it clear that she was only here to visit them on behalf of the hospital director. Lung Ruoxue understood why this madam had come. However, one shouldn't hit a smiling person. Since the other party had taken the initiative to come to her door to express goodwill, she couldn't just kick him out. Mrs. Hospital Director, please have a seat, Lung Ruoxue said courteously with a smile. After they sat down, the hospital director's wife could not help but look at the people in the living room again. Lung Ruoxue could only give her a simple introduction. Looking at the demon and Lung Ruoxue, the hospital director's wife couldn't help but praise them. What a golden couple. However, she was more interested in Lung Ruoxue's older brother. It was said that he was still single. It's good to be single. It just so happened that they had a daughter who had just turned 20. Looking at Lung Ruhan, the hospital director's wife was like a mother-in-law looking at her son-in-law. The more she looked at her, the more satisfied she was. The principal's wife, who kept nodding at Lung Ruhan, made Lung Ruoxue and the others sense that something was not right. However, they were all smart people, so they naturally did not say anything. After the hospital director's wife sized up Lung Ruhan, she continued to bond with Lung Ruoxue. After a warm chat, the hospital director's wife reluctantly got up and left. Before they left, the hospital director's wife looked at Lung Ruhan's nostalgic eyes, which gave Lung Ruoxue and the others goosebumps. After the hospital director's wife left, everyone could not help but look at Lung Ruhan in silence. What was going on? He had been stared at by a beautiful middle-aged woman for a long time. His grandfather and the others didn't have to react like this, right? AI. Lung Qingtian sighed heavily. Lung Ruhan felt even more helpless when she heard that. Was he being unjustly attacked? After that, Lung Qingtian could not help but ask, could that woman have taken a fancy to Ruhan? She was a married woman. That's absolutely not allowed. Thanks, Grandpa. This is impossible. Lung Ruhan's handsome face was flushed red. Of course, it was from anger. Hee. I'm just making a guess. Lung Qingtian couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed when he saw his grandson getting angry. Can you just guess this kind of thing? Lung Ruhan huffed. Grandson, don't be angry. If someone is interested in you, it means you're outstanding. Lung Qingtian said with a fawning smile. I don't need this kind of excellence. Lung Ruhan said gloomily. After he finished speaking, he went upstairs in a huff. Grandpa, you're really an old kid. How can you joke about this kind of thing? Lung Ruoxue was a little speechless. Her grandfather was really getting more and more mischievous as he lived. I was just trying to liven up the atmosphere. However, could it be that the hospital director's wife has really taken a fancy to Ruhan? Lung Qingtian asked curiously as he looked at Lung Ruoxue in anticipation. Yes, I do. Lung Ruoxue nodded. She just wanted her brother to be her son-in-law. Of course, Lung Ruoxue didn't explain too clearly due to her bad taste. When Lung Qingtian and the others heard this, they couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock, as if they had heard some kind of fantasy. Looking at the disbelieving crowd, Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. She then pulled the evildoer and went upstairs. Back in the room, the evildoer hugged Lung Ruoxue as they lay on the bed. He then asked in a gossipy manner, Shue, did that old woman really take a fancy to your brother? The demon felt that based on his understanding of Shue, if such a thing really happened, Shue would definitely not be nice to that woman. But now Shue was not angry. Yes, they have taken a fancy to him and want him to be their son-in-law. Lung Ruoxue laughed. I knew it. Shue, you're getting worse and worse. Why didn't you say anything when we were downstairs? You even deliberately let Grandpa and the others misunderstand. The demon said helplessly. Shue was also quite mischievous. It's not fun to say out loud. I just think that you're not young anymore. It's time for you to fall in love. Lung Ruoxue laughed. She also felt that if her brother had known about this earlier, he might have run away. Can't you let her be mentally prepared? Besides, she's just an ordinary person. Would she be suitable for your brother? After thinking for a while, the demon said, We'll only know if she's suitable after seeing her. If that girl can really make brother like her, ordinary people are not a problem at all. Lung Ruoxue smiled slyly. You're right. Shue, was my child well behaved today? The demon nodded and asked. He asked this question almost every day, or else he would not be at ease. Of course, he's obedient. Lung Ruashua said proudly. Good. Shwet, let me touch you. The demon requested. No. Lung Ruashua rejected firmly. Why won't you let me touch it? I also want to feel the existence of the baby. The demon said with some grievance. Lung Ruashua did not answer. Instead, she asked, Evildoer, do you really only want one child? She had asked the evildoer this question before. At that time, the evildoer had told her firmly that one was enough and that there was no need to have more. It was this sentence that made her feel conflicted. If the demon found out that she had more than one child in her stomach, she didn't know if he could take the blow. It was because of this that she didn't dare to let the demon touch her, or else she would be exposed. Of course, I won't do it if you give birth to more and they fight with me for you. The demon said with certainty. Chapter 3055. Lung Ruhan's Peach Blossom 3. Then what if he's overthinking it? Lung Ruashua probed. Too many? It 1T. This time was an accident, and I will be very careful in the future. I will never let an accident happen again, so we will only have this one time. There will be no next time. The demons will said firmly. They'll listen to you. Lung Ruashua said guiltily. It didn't matter if there would be a next accident. The key was this time. After confirming it, Lung Ruashua was even more afraid to let the evildoer touch her. Hence, she could only find an excuse that she was afraid that he would scare the child. After all, the child was still young. After hearing Lung Ruakshu's reason, the evildoer was a little upset, but he did not think too much about it. The two of them chatted for a while more before he hugged Lung Ruashua and entered dreamland. A few days later, when the headmaster's wife came to visit again, there was a beautiful young girl by her side. At first, the young lady was very reluctant. However, after seeing Lung Ruhan, the young lad's attitude changed drastically, and she became more enthusiastic towards Lung Ruashua. This young lady was the precious daughter of the director and his wife. When the hospital director's wife returned home and told the director her idea, the director immediately made the decision. This was a good idea. Why didn't he think of this earlier? However, after the couple told their daughter their thoughts, they were strongly opposed to it. The girl was in her second year of university this year and already had a crush on someone. Therefore, she was quite disgusted by her parents' attempt to arrange her marriage. However, the hospital director's wife was too domineering and threatened to cut off her pocket money. So she had no choice but to follow the hospital director's wife to the hospital unwillingly. However, after seeing Lung Ruhan, all the unwillingness in her heart turned into a heart full of pink heart. In the past, she used to think that the senior she had a crush on was a godlike figure to her. But compared to this man in front of her, the difference was like heaven and earth. What was a god? This was a true god. After falling in love with Lung Ruhan at first sight, the young girl became very proactive. She leaned in front of Lung Ruhan and said, Senior, you look familiar. Have we met before? I'm afraid this young lady has recognized the wrong person. We've never met before. Hearing the young lad's words, Lung Ruhan thought for a moment and said with certainty, Ugh. The young girl was a little worried when she heard Lung Ruhan's words. She was obviously trying to hit on him. Why was this man so unromantic? Maybe I'm wrong. May I ask for Senior's name? The young girl was depressed for a moment before she asked again. My surname is Lung. You can call me Mr. Lung. Also, I'm not your senior. Lung Ruhan said seriously. This time, the young girl was so depressed that she wanted to bang her head against the wall. This man was far more than just this unromantic. She's simply a dumb goose. As for Lung Ruhan, who was labeled as a dummy by her, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with his answer at all. He did not like creatures like women to begin with, so he was naturally very cold to the girl who was trying to strike up a conversation with him. However, Lung Ruashua was clear that her brother was acting this way not only because of his personality, but also because he didn't like this little girl. The hospital director's wife was also feeling depressed. She looked at Lung Ruashua with hidden bitterness and tried to smooth things over. Miss Lung, your brother is so introverted. Yup, Brother rarely chats with girls. Lung Ruoxua laughed. I see. After listening to Lung Ruoxu's explanation, the hospital director's wife automatically assumed that Lung Ruhan's coldness and alienation were due to shyness. She secretly decided in her heart that she would bring her daughter here often for a walk in the future. It would be fine once she was familiar with it. With this thought in mind, the hospital director's wife did not stay for long this time before she left with her reluctant daughter. After the mother and daughter had left, the evildoer and the rest came out of the room and smiled ambiguously at Lung Ruhan. Lung Qingtian was finally at ease. He could see that the hospital director's wife had a young daughter. The implications of this were self-evident. He patted Lung Ruhan's shoulder and said, "Come on, Grandpa has high hopes for you." Lung Ruhan was very depressed. He did not say anything, but he did not do anything, right? What the hell? However, the others did not give him a chance to explain. After Lung Qingtian, Uncle Long, and the others also patted his shoulder and went off to do their work, Lung Ruoxua looked at her brother sympathetically and gave him a helpless look. She then pulled the evildoer back to her room to teach the child. Education must start from childhood. Lung Ruoxua would never let up on this aspect of education. In an instant, Lung Ruhan was the only one left in the living room. Accompanying him were the beasts. However, none of the beasts took the initiative to pay attention to him. They only glanced at him from time to time. Lung Ruhan was depressed, so she grabbed Bai Su and Feng Zhan to have a chat. However, after he talked to himself for a long time, neither of them gave him a reply. This fact made him extremely angry. "Can you guys say something to me?" Lung Ruhan could not take it anymore and growled. Bai Su and Feng Zhan blinked their bright eyes and looked at each other. They both decided to ignore his words. "Say something to me." Lung Ruhan, who was extremely angry, grabbed Bai Su and looked him in the eye. Bai Su stomped his meaty limbs and said in a low voice, "Master Big Brother, Master doesn't allow us to speak. Have you forgotten? There's no one else here." Lung Ruhan was speechless. Thanks in reality, they were the ones who did not want to bother with Lung Ruhan, which was why they had remained silent. Lung Ruhan was speechless after hearing Feng Zhan's words. These two must be talking nonsense. Who would dare to capture you? Do you not want to live? AI. He could tell that the other party didn't want to talk to him at all. Lung Ruhan had no choice but to let these two little things go. On the other side, the hospital director's daughter followed her mother home, and she looked like she was in love with someone. She said to the hospital director's wife, "Mom, I've taken a fancy to that man." "I knew it." "Little girl, as the saying goes, there's a thin layer between a woman and a man. Whether or not you can get such an excellent man depends on your ability. The only thing Mom can do is to build a good relationship with Lung Ruoxua. Of course, you have to think of ways to please Lung Ruoxua too. As long as you can get her to put in a few good words for you in front of her own brother, you'll definitely get twice the results with half the effort." The hospital director's wife warned. She understood her daughter's stubbornness too well. She said that because she was afraid that her daughter would accidentally offend Lung Ruoxua. If that happened, she would lose more than she gained. "Mom, I know what to do," the hospital director's daughter promised. However, she did not think so. She felt that she was going to be Lung Ruoxu's sister-in-law in the future. Why would she need to please her sister-in-law? With this thought in mind, she did not go through Lung Ruoxu's path. Instead, she went straight to Lung Ruhan. On a certain day, Lung Ruhan was preparing to go home after class at the academy. When she reached the main entrance, she suddenly heard someone call her name. Then, a beautiful young lady appeared in front of her. She looked at the young lady for a long time until her face turned red. In the end, Lung Ruhan said, "Miss, do we know each other?" The young girl's expression stiffened when she heard this. "Do we know each other? You bastard. Did she hear wrongly?" The other party had actually asked her if they knew each other. She had to admit that this was the second time they had met since the last time they met. But it had only been a few days. The other party couldn't possibly be so forgetful that he had forgotten about her so quickly, right? The young girl was a little confused. She really wanted to scratch the wall. "You really don't remember me?" the young girl asked, unwilling to give up. Lung Ruhan shook his head honestly. He really could not remember. Miao Yuer, I've been to your house with my mother. The young girl gritted her teeth and warned. Miao Yuer. Lung Ruhan repeated the young girl's name. Her extremely handsome face was still filled with confusion. My father is the director of your sister's hospital. The young girl, who was Miao Yuer, continued to remind him. Oh, Lung Ruhan said, as if she had come to a sudden realization. You remember now? Seeing Lung Ruhan's expression, Miao Yuer finally heaved a sigh of relief. If the other party didn't even remember her father, she would only be more depressed. Why are you here? I don't think you're from our school. Lung Ruhan asked in confusion. Hearing this, Miao Yuer became embarrassed. She was truly too embarrassed to say that she had come especially to look for him. I'm here on business. I know you're at Nether Blue Academy, so I came to take a look. After thinking for a while, Miao Yuer said in a reserved manner. When Lung Ruhan heard this, she quickly urged, I see. Then quickly get to work. Don't delay the important matters. Miao Yuer secretly hated him. This man was even more unromantic than she had imagined. Why didn't he understand her hint? In reality, Lung Ruhan really did not understand. He had even forgotten that he had seen the young lady before him. So how could he have thought that she had come to the school to look for him? He wasn't that narcissistic. More importantly, he didn't have any feelings for Miao Yuer. Moreover, ever since the hospital director's wife left with her daughter, no one had mentioned this matter again for fear of angering Lung Ruhan. Even though everyone had been gossiping about it in their hearts for a long time, they did not dare to say it out loud. As such, he had long forgotten about Miao Yuer, whose name he did not even know. However, at this moment, Miao Yuer would never admit that the other party had forgotten that she was not interested in her. So after feeling depressed, she could only try to find a topic to talk about. I'm done with my business. I'm fine now. Oh, since you're fine, let's go home. It's not good for a girl to loiter outside. Lung Ruhan said kindly. Hearing this, Miao Yuer became even more depressed. However, she still tried her best to say, It's still early. Oh, I saw that you had a lot of small animals at home last time. I love small animals too. Can I go to your house to have a look? Facing Miao Yuer's expectant gaze, Lung Ruhan was in a difficult position. The beasts in his house were not ordinary beasts that could be admired by people. If he really brought her home, those beasts would probably go berserk. I'm sorry, it's not convenient for outsiders to visit my beastie at home. Lung Ruhan rejected after some thought. An outsider. An outsider. These two words had a huge impact on Miao Yuer, and she was also very unwilling. Although she was an outsider now, she would become his wife one day. Miao Yuer clenched her fists. Chapter 3056. Girl, you've gained weight. 1. Once Miao Yuer had made up her mind, she would not give up so easily. Thus, under her coaxing and pestering, the thin-skinned Lung Ruhan could not resist her pestering skills and brought her home unwillingly. Logically speaking, he should not have given in so quickly. However, the other party was just an ordinary human. Hence, Lung Ruhan felt that he could not chase him away even if he wanted to. If he accidentally killed the other party. Flowers and plants were also lives, not to mention a human. Basically, Lung Ruhan and the others who had come to the mortal world had restrained their temper. They were not willing to destroy the entire planet Indigo in a fit of anger. Hence, as long as the other party did not cross their bottom line, they were willing to tolerate them. But now, this little girl only wanted to go to their house. Moreover, it was not like she had never been there before. Hence, even though Lung Ruhan was unwilling, he agreed after some thought. When they reached home and saw Miao Yuer, Lung Ruoxue and the rest's eyes widened. They could not hide the shock and astonishment on their faces. How could they not be shocked? Lung Ruhan, who had always kept a distance from women and knew that they had feelings for him, had actually brought a certain woman back. This was simply a fantasy. It was really too unbelievable. Initially, Lung Ruhan had no intention of bringing Miao Yuer back. In his eyes, this little girl was just the daughter of the director of the hospital where his sister had interned. But now, when he saw the surprise, disbelief, and a little pink bubbles in the eyes of the crowd. He instantly felt like scratching the wall. This feeling was really bad. The gloominess in his heart couldn't be described with words. In short, it was suffocating. It was very congested. It wasn't an ordinary traffic jam. At the thought of this, Lung Ruhan's face turned completely black. Then, she pointed at Miaoya and said to Lung Ruoxue and the rest, "Miss Miao wanted to see our beastie. I didn't want to bring her here, but she kept pestering me, so I had to bring her here. Jikai, you can make the arrangements." Lung Ruhan's honest words made Lung Ruoxue and the others speechless. "Big brother, is it really good for you to be so honest?" "Grandson, you're too honest." "Ruhan, a man who is too honest will not be able to find a wife." Everyone had their own thoughts, but Lung Ruhan did not care what they were thinking and went upstairs directly. Jikai, who had been called to receive the guests, was depressed. Was it really good for young Master Han to leave this matter to him? Jikai sneaked a glance at Miao Yuer, whose expression was a little stiff, and felt extremely sympathetic for her. Pursuing a man who didn't understand romance was really enough for her to suffer. However, despite his sympathy, he still had to do what he had to do. Seeing that Lung Ruoxue and the others had no intention of speaking, Jikai took the initiative to ask, "Miss Miao, you want to see Beastie, right?" "What right?" "She was here to see someone." When Miao Yuer heard this, the anger in her heart surged up. However, what made her even sadder was Lung Ruhan's attitude. That fellow really did not put her in his eyes. Thanks, she was very depressed, but she also knew that she couldn't offend this family because of her momentary willfulness. Otherwise, she was afraid that her road to pursuing her husband would be even more bumpy. "My family's beastie all have their own personalities, so I really can't guarantee that they'll be willing to let you see them." After confirming, Jikai said with some difficulty. He had said the ugly words in advance, or else he was really afraid that Miao Yuer wouldn't be able to accept it. It should be known that the man's lack of interest in her had already made this little girl very depressed. If Beastie continued to ignore her, Jikai couldn't guarantee that this little girl wouldn't break down from sadness. Fortunately, Miao Yuer did not take his words to heart. After all, watching animals was just an excuse for her to get close to Lung Ruhan. Now, the unromantic man had returned to his room. Since she couldn't catch up with him, she had to save face, right? So at this time, the excuse of looking at animals became crucial. After Jikai brought Miaoya to the garden, Lung Ruoxue and the others heaved a sigh of relief. However, they didn't know what to say. Suddenly, a shrill scream rang out. Lung Ruoxue and the rest looked at each other before running out of the living room. When they arrived at the garden, everyone saw Miao Yuer holding one of her hands, sitting on the ground and screaming in pain. Jikai stood beside her expressionlessly, as if it was none of his business. Although they didn't know why Jikai was like this, Lung Ruoxue and the others knew that Miao Yuer must have done something to make him unhappy. Otherwise, with Jikai's hospitality, he wouldn't have ignored it. As the host, Lung Ruoxue took the initiative to ask, "Jikai, what happened?" "Madam, Miss Miao hurt Xiao Hui and was scratched by it." Jikai told the truth. The Xiao Hui he was talking about was the gray mini rabbit. Originally, Miao Yuer's eyes were on Bai Su, but how could Bai Su be willing to let a strange woman touch him? Therefore, he didn't give her the chance to pull him in. In the face of Bai Zu's ferocity and the other beasties' hostility, Miao Yuer naturally had to lock her gaze on the harmless little rabbit. But who knew that the rabbit was not to be trifled with? When the gray rabbit was held in Miao Yuer's arms, at first, the gray rabbit enjoyed the beautiful woman's caress. But after a while, Miao Yuer suddenly thought of something. The rabbit was in pain from her grasp, and in a situation where it could not break free, it could only scratch Miao Yuer. One had to know that although the gray rabbit was the mainframe inside, since the rabbit had become its incarnation, it would also feel pain. Moreover, its skin was very thin, so how could it withstand being trampled on like this? As the saying went, when the rabbit was anxious, it would scratch people. Therefore, it didn't hold back and clawed down. Miao Yuer, who had been scratched, screamed, and threw away the rabbit in her hand. She was so angry that she even kicked the rabbit a few times. The gray rabbit was quite small, so after being kicked, it naturally flew away in an arc. It was because of this that Ji Kai, who had wanted to comfort Miao was annoyed. How could he marry a woman who didn't care about small animals? He was really too heartless. However, Miao didn't realize that she had done something she shouldn't have done. Her entire mind was on her scratched hand. When she saw Lung Ruoxue, Miao also raised her bloody hand and said angrily, "Lung Ruoxue, your rabbit scratched me." Lung Ruoxue laughed when she heard that. "My rabbit wouldn't scratch people. You must have done something." This was not Lung Ruoxue's way of shielding her, but the truth. She knew her beastie's personality better than anyone else. She would not let her beastie suffer for the sake of anyone's face. Therefore, Lung Ruoxue had no intention of letting the little rabbit admit to this crime. Chapter 3057. Girl, you've gained weight. 2. Lung Ruoxue didn't take it seriously, but Miao wasn't happy about it. She stood up from the ground with a whoosh, her face red with anger as she roared, "Lung Ruoxue, what do you mean? Could it be that I let that little beast scratch me? What I mean is that you must have done something to make my beastie unhappy, so it scratched you. I didn't say that you let it scratch you, so please don't misunderstand." Lung Ruoxue explained with a smile. "What did I do? What can I do? I only touched that little bastard a few times." After hearing this, Miao shouted again. She was really about to die from anger. Did Lung Ruoxue know who she was? She was going to be Lung Ruoxue's sister-in-law in the future. How could Lung Ruoxue treat her like this? Miao was very angry, and the consequences would be very serious. Without thinking, she called her parents. "Dad, Mom, I was scratched by a little animal. Come quickly." Lung Ruoxue and the others watched on coldly as Miao yelled into the phone. No one said anything. After she finished her phone call, everyone turned around and went back to the living room. Seeing this, Miao also entered the living room and said arrogantly, "I've already called my parents. Just wait for them to question you." Hearing this, Lung Ruoxue and the rest were speechless. It was just a scratch. Was there any to blame? However, no one made a sound, and only allowed Miao to run around blindly. But at this moment, everyone had already denied Miao in their hearts. It would be a big problem to marry such a woman. Miao, who had been denied, would never have thought that because of her ruckus, her reserved observation opportunity had been canceled by everyone. When the director and his wife arrived, they saw the wound on Miao's hand and felt sorry for her. However, they were not as willful as Miao, so they asked for the reason rationally. After Ji Kai explained, the two looked at each other and said, "Since it's just an accident, then forget it. Dad, Mom, how can you just let it go like this? I was scratched." Miao was unhappy when she heard this, and directly shouted at the top of her voice. When the hospital director's wife saw that her daughter was so insensible, she was so angry that she was about to die. However, she was her daughter after all, so after she gave Miao a look, she said, "This is also your fault. If you didn't scratch that rabbit in pain, how would you have been scratched? So, don't be unreasonable anymore and stay here." The hospital director's wife said all this for her daughter's good, but the furious Miao couldn't tell. She only felt that her mother had changed. She was no longer on her side. This was a fact that Miao could not accept at all. After that, he heard Miao's angry voice. "Mom, you're your daughter. How can you help an outsider?" "It was clearly that little beast who scratched me. It's fine if you don't seek justice for me, but you're still blaming me." When the hospital director's wife heard her daughter's words, she almost fainted from anger. She glared at Miao in exasperation. Just as she was about to continue speaking, Lung Ruoxue spoke. "Thanks, your little beast scratched me, so of course you have to compensate me for my loss." Miao said without even thinking. "You mean you want me to pay for the medical expenses?" Lung Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes and asked indifferently. "It's not just the hospital fees, it's also the fees for my mental health." Miao Yue reminded. Yes, no problem. Lung Ruoxue smiled and nodded. She then looked at the headmaster teasingly and said, On this point, you and the director are indeed father and daughter. You're both thinking of the same thing. The dean's face turned red. He glared at his daughter a few times, trying to make her take back what she had just said, but would Miao Yue listen to him? Not only that, but she also felt that her father was no longer on her side. This made Miao Yue very sad. In fact, how could the director not side with his daughter? However, he was very clear that there was no benefit in asking Lung Ruoxue for compensation for the emotional damage she had done to him. He had definitely experienced this before. Unfortunately, Miao Yue still couldn't understand his painstaking efforts. As for Lung Ruoxue, she pretended not to see the father-daughter pair's flirtatious gazes and continued to ask, Miss Miao, how much compensation do you want? Name a number. You'll pay for all the medical expenses for my injury. As for the emotional damage, I don't want any money. I just want Lung Ruhan to go on a date with me. Miao Yue said righteously. She wasn't stupid. She knew that this was definitely a good time to raise conditions, so she naturally wouldn't let it go. When the hospital director and his wife heard this, their hearts skipped a beat. They looked at Lung Ruoxue with anticipation. Although their daughter was a little willful, they felt comforted and uneasy at the same time when she thought of this. However, as parents, they naturally hoped that their daughter could get what she wanted. However, they were too uncertain because Lung Ruoxue did not look like someone who would compromise. Who knew that Lung Ruoxue would only smile after hearing that and remain silent for a long time. It wasn't until the hospital directors and madam's hearts were beating so wildly that they almost jumped out of their chests that she calmly opened her mouth and said, I'll consider Miss Miao's suggestion. Now let me share my thoughts. Although my rabbit scratched you, you also kicked it away and caused that poor little rabbit to be seriously injured and on the verge of death. So, as its master, I have to seek justice for it. Lung Ruoxue continued. After she finished speaking, she deliberately paused and looked at the director and madam. The hospital director and madam's already uneasy hearts were thrown into chaos by her casual glance. However, Lung Ruoxue did not give them a chance to speak and continued. I also want Miss Miao to compensate for my Xiao Hu's hospital fees and mental damage. What? He's just a little bastard. When Miao Yue heard this, she was instantly enraged. In your eyes, Xiao Hui might be a little beast, but in our eyes, he's our family. One had to know that all life was equal. Just because Miss Miao is a human, you want to strip away the meaning of life for other living beings? Lung Ruoxue said righteously. At this moment, she had the aura of a charlatan, and Miao Yue was stunned. When Miao Yue finally came back to her senses, she angrily said, Humans are the noblest life forms. How can those little bastards be compared to humans? Miss Miao, your way of thinking is definitely wrong. Lung Ruoxue smiled. Where did I go wrong? Miao Yue asked, unconvinced. You're wrong in your thinking. We are all living beings, and there's no such thing as high or low, even more so after death. Lung Ruoxue explained simply. After death, all living things would have to go to hell. In hell, how many would remember their past? Chapter 3058. Girl, you've gained weight. 3. You mean we're the same after death? Miao Yue gritted her teeth and asked, Maybe it's not even as good as these little beasts. Lung Ruoxue replied with a nod. What did you just say? How can I be inferior to those little bastards? Miao Yue exploded. Don't you know that if you make too many mistakes while you're alive, you have to settle the score after you die? Lung Ruoxue asked in surprise. How is this possible? Miao Yue didn't believe him at all. Lung Ruoxue did not care whether she believed her or not. She only said, Let's not talk about what will happen after death first. Let's talk about what's happening now. In my eyes, you and Xiao Hui are the same. So since you've heard it, you naturally have to compensate. What if I don't? Miao Yue didn't expect that after Lung Ruoxue's nonsense, she would still talk about this matter when she turned around. She was instantly even angrier. If you don't compensate it, then I won't compensate you with anything either. We're even now. Lung Ruoxue smiled faintly. How can this be? Miao Yuer's anger rose, and she was so angry that her eyes were about to spit fire. Why can't I? Oh, I remember now. You were the one who heard it first. So my little gray is completely acting in self-defense and doesn't need to give you any compensation at all. However, you still have to pay for my little gray's medical expenses. As for the mental damage, seeing that you're also injured, I won't ask for it from you. Lung Ruoxue said as she came to a sudden realization. Miao made Lung Ruoxue so angry that she was speechless. At this time, Ji Kai, who had good eyesight, carried the small gray rabbit, which was seriously injured and had only one breath left, and placed it in front of the dean and his wife. The director and his wife were at a loss for words as they looked at the little gray ball of fur that was stained red with blood. The meaning was already very obvious. He wanted them to take responsibility. Although the hospital director and his wife were very depressed, they still silently admitted their bad luck in order to maintain a good relationship with Lung Ruoxue. How should he put this? Whether he paid or not, it would be quite depressing. Now, their daughter didn't even get to take advantage of them. Hence, they didn't want their daughter's willfulness to make Lung Ruoxue unhappy or even cause them to fall out. Seeing that the hospital director and madam did not say anything, Lung Ruoxue smiled and said, "Now it's clear who hurt the most, so I don't need to tell you how to solve it. Right? Okay, I can compensate for this little bastard's medical expenses, but what about mine?" After hearing Lung Ruoxue's words, and realizing that her parents had remained silent, Miao Yuer could only save herself. My Xiao Hui was just defending himself. But, for the sake of the director, I can reimburse your medical expenses. Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. What about my emotional damage? Miao Yuer asked again. She was going on a date with Lung Ruhan. It's offset. Lung Ruoxue said matter-of-factly. What? Miao Yuer shrieked, her face full of indignation. This was really bullying. Thanks, my house's Xiao Hui doesn't even want you to pay for his mental damage. So of course we won't pay for yours either. Lung Ruoxue replied honestly. All right, this matter ends here. The dean sighed helplessly. When it came to scheming, none of them were Lung Ruoxue's match. See, with this, the compensation for emotional damage would be gone. He believed that if he continued to offset the medical expenses, he would not need to pay. In reality, it wasn't that he was short on medical expenses. It was just that he felt that it was extremely unfair to let Lung Ruoxue, this little girl, gain the upper hand in everything. Therefore, although his daughter was a little willful, he could still turn a blind eye to it as long as she didn't make a big mistake under the supervision of the couple. Since the principal has said so, then this matter will end here. By the way, they'll have someone give you the medical fees after Xiao Hu's injuries are healed. Lung Ruoxue said, giving the director face. After the matter was settled, the director and his wife didn't dare to stay a moment longer. They pulled Miao Yuer and left as if they were running for their lives. After they left, the little gray rabbit that was on the verge of death actually jumped up and looked at Lung Ruoxue with a fawning expression. Master, my acting skills aren't bad, right? Not bad, continue acting. Lung Ruoxue said indifferently. The little gray rabbit was unhappy and asked why. Just in case. Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. As such, the little gray rabbit became a tragedy and was severely injured. At the same time, after the hospital director and his wife took their daughter home, they started to scold her. The hospital director's wife, in particular, had a resentful expression on her face. Mom, I didn't do it on purpose. It's all because Lung Ruhan doesn't want to talk to me at all. I was so angry that Miao Yuer couldn't help but explain. You silly child. If you cause a scene like this, I'm afraid they'll be even more unwilling to pay attention to you. The hospital director's wife glared at her daughter and said through gritted teeth, How could this be? Was it their rabbit that scratched me? Miao Yuer didn't understand. Shouldn't she be comforted when she was injured? Lung Ruhan should at least ask, right? AI. Originally, if you didn't make a fuss, they would definitely feel bad. But after what you did, They would only think that you were being unreasonable, and their impression of you would be even worse. The hospital director's wife sighed. Then what should we do? Miao was a little flustered. Even though she was a little emotional when she made a fuss, she really wanted to draw Lung Ruhan out from her room. Because of this, who would have thought that Lung Ruhan did not show up even after they left the villa? Thinking of this, Miao Yuer became even more depressed. What else can we do? Of course, he had to do his best to remedy it. You, in the future, don't be so impulsive when you encounter problems. Use your brain, okay? And towards Lung Ruoxue, what kind of attitude is that? Remember this, if you can be with her brother, Lung Ruoxue will be your future sister-in-law. You have to please her. Otherwise, if she says a few bad things about you in front of her brother, do you still want to be your sister-in-law? The hospital director's wife scolded again. I know, Miao said, although she didn't think much of it. After thinking about it carefully, she really had to start with Lung Ruoxue. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get close to that dumb goose. After thinking it through, Miao Yuer instantly decided that she would take the path of a sister-in-law in the future. The next day, Lung Ruoxue was surprised to see Miao Yuer at her door. He had thought that this little girl would not appear so soon because she was so angry. He didn't expect the other party to be so impatient and come again so quickly. In addition, when she saw Miao Yuer's gentle smile, Lung Ruoxue felt a gust of cold wind blow past her. She was nervous. Chapter 3059. Girl, you've gained weight. 4. One must be up to no good. Instantly, Lung Ruoxue became alert. Miao Yuer took the initiative to hold Lung Ruoxue's arm and said affectionately, Ruoxue, it was my fault yesterday. I'm here today to apologize to you. Can you forgive me? Ruoxue, apologize? This was not normal. This was definitely not the normal seedling. Lung Ruoxue made her judgment. Although she hadn't been in contact with Miao Yuer for a long time, she was very clear that this little girl was very headstrong and wouldn't say such words easily. Such an action could only mean one thing: the other party had a motive. As for what they were after, it went without saying. Initially, Lung Ruoxue thought that it was a good thing for her brother to have some peaches. However, those peaches had to be good peaches and not rotten ones. Right now, Miao Yuer was just a rotten peach blossom in her heart. However, facing this rotten peach blossom in front of her, she didn't show it on her face. Instead, she said affectionately, what happened yesterday is already in the past. Let's not talk about it anymore. Acting. Keep acting. Let's see who can pretend better. Lung Ruoxue felt that she was quite free recently, so she was happy to put on an act with Miao Yuer. From that day on, the two of them became best friends. Miao Yuer had practically grown up in their house. Facing Miao Yuer, who said that she wanted to take care of Xiao Hui, Ji Kai was helpless. Xiao Hui was completely fine, and if she were to take care of him, what would she do if her cover was blown? But he didn't need to worry about this matter. Song had already completed it for him. What could he do? Beat up Xiao Hui. This time, Xiao Hui's feigned illness became a real illness, and he completely hated Miao Yuer. Every day, when it saw Miao Yuer busily taking care of it, Xiao Hui would not give it a good face. It even glared at her with hostility. How could Xiao Hui not hate him? He was fine at first, but now he was fine. In order to make it look like he was seriously injured, sob, Xiao Hui was so sad. How could he treat such a cute little animal like this? It was too cruel. However, Miao Yuer would never have thought that Xiao Hui hated her to death. She just thought that Xiao Hui still remembered her kicking it a few times, but she didn't care at all. After all, she had already successfully entered the inner chamber, even though she had not spent much time with Lung Ruhan. At least Lung Ruhan would not ask her who she was when they met. This was progress. More importantly, she felt that her friendship with Lung Ruoxue had also improved by leaps and bounds. But what she didn't know was that when the evildoers saw her now, it was as if he had seen an enemy. Therefore, the evildoer had tried to persuade Lung Ruoxue to stay away from Miao Yuer. At the end of the day, Miao Yuer had violated his interests and hindered his time with his wife. More importantly, once Miao Yuer arrived, All the people and animals in the villa had to be careful, in case she accidentally discovered something that she should not know. Especially the beasties, they simply didn't dare to appear rashly, afraid that they would speak human language when they weren't paying attention. That would scare people. Thanks it was for this reason that the crowd and the beasts had unanimously decided that they must not let Lung Ruhan find an ordinary person. Lung Ruhan did not know what to say after listening to everyone's serious decision. In fact, he, who enjoyed his single life, had no intention of looking for a wife at all. All along, it had been others who had been worrying for nothing. What was the saying again? The emperor wasn't in a hurry, but the eunuch was. Of course, the kind Lung Ruhan would never say what was in her heart. A month later, Xiao Hui was already full of energy, but Miao Yuerer still came to report every day. Everyone really couldn't stand it. This time, they didn't care what excuse Miao Yuerer was making up. They unanimously recommended Lung Qingtian to talk to Miao Yuerer. Why didn't he look for Lung Ruoxue? Because Xue had said that they were guests and should be treated well. What else did they not understand? Xue was bored, so she wanted to find some fun for herself. Therefore, she would definitely not take the initiative to drive Miao Yuerer away. If that was the case, they could only save themselves. The person who made the move was Lung Qingtian, Xue and Ruhan's biological grandfather. Hence, everyone felt that since Miao Yuerer wanted to pursue Lung Ruhan, her grandfather should also please her, right? In this way, Miao Yuerer probably wouldn't dare to refute the words of her grandfather. P and D and Ov1. When Miao Yuerer heard this, her eyes immediately reddened, and she said with a slightly choked voice, "Grandpa, do you hate me?" Although the grandfather in front of him looked younger than his father, he was not his senior. Hence, Miao Yuerer didn't dare to treat this old man like how she treated Lung Ruoxue. Knowing that the elderly liked the weak, younger generation, Miao Yuerer immediately pretended to be pitiful after hearing the other party's words. The fact had proven that her strategy was a success. This was all thanks to the hospital director's wife's careful teaching during this period of time. It could be said that the hospital director's wife had analyzed the two close relatives by Lung Ruhan's side for Miao Yuerer, and finally concluded that Lung Ruoxue's status in the Lung family was extremely high. Therefore, Lung Ruoxue was also the number one person that Miao Yuerer had to curry favor with. Now, the first person she wanted to please didn't come out to chase her away. Instead, it was Grandpa Fong who made a move. Naturally, Miao Yuerer thought of a strategy to deal with the old man. When Lung Qingtian saw her like this, he really didn't know how to continue. If he continued, it would seem like he was bullying a child. How was he going to break this feeling? Lung Qingtian couldn't help but send out a signal for help to Uncle Long and the others who were watching from the side. However, those people were even more helpless than him. If Miao Yuerer continued to be unreasonable, they could still deal with her ruthlessly. But now, she didn't make a fuss, and she didn't say anything inappropriate. She only looked at you pitifully with tears in her eyes. What did you do? Ruthlessly destroy a flower? They were not that cruel. Lung Qingtian and the others were so frustrated that they wanted to bang their heads against the wall. After a while, Lung Qingtian continued, "I don't hate you. I mean, you're still young and should focus on your studies. But look, you don't even go to school now. How can you do that? The exam is coming up, right? You want to repeat a year? I know what to do. Grandpa, you don't have to worry about me." After hearing Lung Qingshan's words, Miao Yuerer's tears turned into laughter. "I'm not worried about you. This is just an excuse to chase you away." Lung Qingtian felt depressed. At the same time, he was not too happy with the title of grandfather. Were little girls these days all so familiar with each other? He's calling me grandfather now. Chapter 3060. Girl, you've gained weight. 5. Lung Qingtian expressed his inability to accept this. However, Grandpa was just a form of address. It couldn't be decided. After thinking about it this way, he also felt relieved. However, even though he was relieved, he was still unhappy that he had not completed the mission. After that, Long Qingshan's face involuntarily darkened. Seeing this, Miao Yuer, who already knew how to read people's expressions, quickly said, "Grandpa, don't worry. I'm not worried about my studies. I've already self-studied everything I need to learn." "I see." Lung Qingtian didn't know what to say anymore. The little girl had already said so much, so it didn't seem right for him to continue chasing her away. Just like that, Lung Qingtian retreated. At the same time, he began to hate the self-learning system of Planet Indigo. After Lung Qingshan's defeat, everyone had wanted to ask Uncle Long to take action, but after some thought, Uncle Long gave up. He felt that it was useless even if her own grandfather came out to drive her away. So he, an outsider, shouldn't join in the fun. She was just a little girl. Did they have to be afraid? In the room, Lung Ruoxue and the demon were well aware of the situation. However, Lung Ruoxue had never expected that her grandfather, Uncle Long, and the others would lose without even fighting. However, they couldn't be blamed for this. After all, Miao Yuer was just an ordinary human girl. The fact that they couldn't do anything to a child must have made her grandfather and the others very depressed. Did you see that? Everyone can't stand this uninvited guest. Quickly tell her not to come." The demon said to Lung Ruoxue gloomily. "Did I ask her to come? I told her not to come, and she won't come?" Blinking her eyes, Lung Ruoxue laughed evilly. I understand." The demon nodded. It was true that Shui did not ask her to come, but Shui did not chase her out either. Thinking of this, he gave Ji Kai a death order. When Ji Kai received the order, he looked depressed and conflicted. Lung Ruoxue glanced at the situation and asked the evildoer, "What did you say to Ji Kai?" "I told Ji Kai not to open the door for that woman starting tomorrow. There's no one in the house." The demon said confidently. Lung Ruoxue fell silent. She really wanted to say that this was a bad idea that could only treat the symptoms but not the root of the problem. Things didn't go as Lung Ruoxue had expected. After several days of Miao Yuer not being able to enter, she found a helper. The so-called helpers were naturally her parents. Unfortunately, the hospital director and his wife did not manage to knock on the door of Lung Ruoxue's villa. In this regard, the family of three was extremely puzzled. Was she not at home, or had she moved away? If he wasn't at home, they could still understand, but if he moved out, wasn't this a little too exaggerated? Just to hide from their daughter? The hospital director and his wife could not believe it. Of course, they did not want what they thought to become a reality. It was a pity that while dreams were beautiful, reality was cruel. Thanks, even if they didn't want to admit it, they had to accept the truth. He had indeed disappeared. Even the old professor didn't know. The hospital director and his wife were certain that there was no one in the villa because the old professor had received a call from Lung Ruoxue. She said that they had gone on a vacation and their return date was uncertain. At the same time, Lung Ruoxue and the rest had already reached the other end of the planet. The entire planet Netherblue was divided into the east and west banks. Previously, they had stayed on the east bank, and now they had taken a boat to the west bank. The customs and people living on the west bank were slightly different from those on the east bank. Here, it was similar to the west in Lung Ruoxue's previous life. The humans were all blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign species. The people were also quite enthusiastic and had a high degree of tolerance for them. Originally, Lung Ruoxue didn't want to run away in such a panic as if she had done something bad. Unfortunately, the crowd didn't give her a chance to choose. They took her on a ship and secretly left the house while she was asleep. On a remote beach on the west coast, they found a piece of land that had no owner. After the two rabbit mainframes used hacking methods to put that piece of land under Lung Ruoxue's name, everyone settled down there. The pace of life on the west coast was obviously slower than that on the east coast, so Lung Ruoxue and the others were happy to accept such a life. Every day, grandfather and the rest would go out to sea to look for some seafood to have a sumptuous meal. They would also check out if there were any treasures in the vast underwater world. The beasts would go into the wild forest nearby. There, they were like fish in water and had a lot of fun. With that, only Lung Ruoxue and the demon were left in the huge house. The demon was simply too satisfied with such understanding people and beasts. He had to give them 20 likes. 5 years later, Lung Ruoxue was already showing signs of pregnancy. At this moment, there was only her and the demon at home. Her grandfather and the rest of the beasts had already left home to do what they liked. Although Lung Qingtian and the others were hesitant when they left, Lung Ruoxue told them to leave without worry. After all, she was very clear that she would not be able to give birth so soon. Knowing that the child of God was definitely different from ordinary humans, Lung Qingtian and the others hesitated for a long time before leaving their home reluctantly. In the past 5 years, he had been so happy that he had forgotten about home. Other than the fact that his wife's stomach was getting bigger and bigger, which made him a little uncomfortable, everything was fine. On a certain day, as usual, the demon was staring at Lung Ruoxue's stomach in a daze. He could feel the bloodline connection between the little life in her stomach and himself. However, he did not know why he suddenly felt a little irritated. "You're overthinking again," Lung Ruoxue said helplessly when she saw the demon's reaction. "In the one you love the most, right?" He raised his head and asked with uncertainty. "Of course." Lung Ruoxue nodded her head heavily. She realized that this evildoer's pregnancy syndrome was getting serious. Fortunately, Song wasn't around, or else Lung Ruoxue would have a bigger headache. When she thought of Song, Lung Ruoxue was shocked to realize that she had not seen her grandfather and the others for a long time. Although they would contact her from time to time, she still missed them after not seeing them for so long. "Girl, I'm back." At this moment, a familiar voice came from outside. Lung Ruoxue raised her head and saw a white light pouncing into her arms. It was so fast that even the evildoer could not stop it. Needless to say, that white light was naturally Tsong. Seeing Tsong, Lung Ruoxue was pleasantly surprised. "Speak of the devil is here." She was just thinking about Tsong. Azure actually came back. Seeing that Azure was still so small, Lung Ruoxue touched its soft fur and said happily, "You finally know to go home. If it wasn't to earn money for our baby's milk powder, I would have come back long ago." Hearing Lung Ruoxue's words, Tsong said arrogantly. Chapter 3061. Girl, you've gained weight. 6. What do you mean by our baby? That's my baby. The moment he heard Azure's words, evildoer was immediately indignant. "It's mine." Exploding hair, Tsong roared. "It's mine." Eva Monster was roaring. Who was afraid of who? Lung Ruoxue was helpless when she saw the man and beast returning to their old ways. "Stop quarreling. I still say the same thing. The baby is mine, and mine alone," Lung Ruoxue shouted back. When Evil Rampage and Azure saw him, they immediately greeted him. "We're just teasing you." After he finished speaking, he was afraid that Lung Ruoxue wouldn't believe him, so the man and beast hugged each other. Then, Tsong jumped into Lung Ruoxue's arms and exclaimed, "Girl, you've gained weight." Lung Ruoxue ground her teeth. As a woman, what was she most afraid of others saying? First, he was ugly. Second, he was fat. Now that Tsong had broken one of the taboos, Lung Ruoxue felt her anger rising as she continued to shout, "Who's fat? Who's fat? That's because my stomach is getting bigger." Sob. He couldn't hurt a pregnant woman. Tsong, who obviously felt that he had said something wrong, looked at Lung Ruoxue carefully and coaxed, "Girl, I was wrong. You're not fat. Your stomach is really big." Azure, who could feel the little life in its stomach, suddenly felt a trace of fear. It wanted to touch it, but didn't dare to. However, it definitely didn't expect that a fat person would cause such a huge stimulation to the girl. But it couldn't be blamed for this. As a beastie, it had never seen a human with a big belly. Afraid that Nyo would really be angry at it, Tsong obediently took the initiative to report to Lung Ruoxue what he had done in the past 5 years. It turned out that had really gone to earn money for milk powder for the baby in Lung Ruoxue's womb. It was just that the money it had earned was a little. It was like this. Ever since Cold learned how to use the internet and found out that it took a lot of money to raise a baby, it thought about earning some money to raise the baby. So, after thinking for a long time, it left home with its 2 hacker rabbits. Of course, these 3 little beasts didn't go too far from home in the beginning, and the 2 little rabbits were best at hacking. Therefore, the 2 top hackers in a half-tone began to set their eyes on some people's wealth. In Tsang's words, this was called robbing the rich to help the poor. It robbed the ill-gotten wealth of some unscrupulous merchants. In addition to helping itself, it also donated a lot of money to orphanages all over planet Indigo. As such, it also made a name for itself on the internet, known as the Hero Bandit. Unfortunately, Azure didn't care what others thought of it. It didn't know that the hackers on the internet had given it the name of a hero thief. The only thing it knew was that it needed a lot of money to support its child. After looting all the ill-gotten gains on planet Indigo, it turned its eyes to other planets. In this way, it was far away from home. However, what made it depressed was that the money on the major planets was not universal at all. So, after collecting a lot of wealth from the major planets, it had to find ways to exchange the useless wealth for things that could be used on planet Netherblue. It had been 5 years since it returned to planet Netherblue. After Lung Ruoxue heard this, she really didn't know what else to say other than gratitude. However, her relationship with Azure was not ordinary, so she naturally did not need to say those polite words. Azure would not want to hear them. As expected, Tsang, who understood Lung Ruoxue's thoughts, nodded and said, "Girl, I'm doing all this for our child. It's our child again." Thanks. After Tsang returned, Lung Ruoxue and Evildoer's 2-person world had ended. Although the demon was depressed, he had to accept it, because no matter Tsang or whoever it was, they couldn't get rid of them. When Azure returned home and discovered that Nyo's stomach had grown, he immediately spread the news. P&D in Ov1. Ko. M. After Jitsong and the 2 little rabbits returned, Lung Ruhan and Qingju were the ones who returned home. This pair was amazing. Why were they together? One had to mention the relationship between the 2 in name. Father and son. That's right, in front of outsiders, Lung Ruhan and Qingju were father and son. However, Qingju had been captured to serve as a servant. The cause of this matter was naturally related to Miao Yuer. Lung Ruhan, who did not want to be harassed by any other woman, borrowed Green Vessel from Shui to be her son before she left home. When Lung Ruoxue heard her brother's plan, she was speechless. She really didn't expect that her brother would come up with such an idea in order to not be entangled with a woman. In fact, she really wanted to tell her brother that if a woman really wanted to pester him, she wouldn't care if he had a wife or children. There's a kind of woman in this world called a mistress. However, seeing her brother's confident look, she did not say anything and just gave Green Vessel to him. Her brother's life should be decided by him. Now that her brother had returned without a woman by his side, Lung Ruoxue guessed that her brother's plan had probably succeeded. Actually, what Lung Ruoxue did not know was that not only did Qingju take on the role of his son, he even had to play the role of Lung Ruhan's wife occasionally. He also had to be a rare beauty. The most beautiful woman Qingju had ever seen was his sister. However, when he transformed into her appearance, Lung Ruhan was driven mad. Who would be able to stand seeing a woman like his sister as his wife? After that, Green Vessel had even changed his appearance into fog, which made Lung Ruhan so angry that she almost beat him up. With no other choice, Green Vessel transformed into a female version of the demon. This time, Lung Ruhan did not beat him up, but she had nothing to say. Clearly, this was another character that couldn't be used. In the end, Qingju could only conjure up a stunning beauty based on his own imagination, and Lung Ruhan was finally satisfied. Indeed, the illusion was the safest. "Big brother, welcome home," Lung Ruoxue said happily as she looked at Lung Ruhan. "Shui, it looks like my nephew is about to give birth." Glancing at Lung Ruoxue's stomach, Lung Ruhan gently pulled her younger sister into her arms. Although the evildoer was jealous, he had no choice but to let Shui-er's brother, his brother-in-law, hug him. In this day and age, he had to please his brother-in-law. After living in the world of ordinary humans for so long, he had already been influenced by them. Yes, Lung Ruoxue nodded. Sister, you still have me. Qingju, who was not willing to be ignored, quickly said. He also wanted to hug his sister, but he was afraid of hurting her, so he did not dare to do it. Brother, how did you explain to the public that your son and name didn't grow up in 5 years? Lung Ruoxue could not help but ask curiously when she saw the little Qingju. We won't be staying in the same place for too long. Moreover, green vessel can transform, so it's easy to grow a few years older. Lung Ruhan explained. Sister, I've been so tired these past 5 years. Qingju grumbled. For the past 5 years, he had followed Lung Ruhan everywhere. Sometimes he was big, sometimes he was young, sometimes he was a man, sometimes he was a woman. He was on the verge of a mental breakdown. If it wasn't for the silly cat's news that their sister's stomach was big, they probably wouldn't have made it back. Chapter 3062. Girl, you've gained weight. 7. Qingju, you've worked hard. Lung Ruoxue patted Qingju's head sympathetically. It's been hard on me. I don't want to go out anymore. It's too tiring. Qingju continued to complain. When Lung Ruhan heard his words, she smiled faintly and said, Don't worry, I won't bring you out with me in the future. When Shui'er's child comes out, they'll take him with me. Did her brother come back to snatch the child from her? Lung Ruoxue was depressed. Their child was not even born yet. Why were there so many people thinking about it? However, the monster was very supportive of Lung Ruhan's words and promised, I'll bring it for you after it's born. Lung Ruoxue was speechless. That's my baby. Song Zi was furious and shouted. The demon ignored this and directly carried his wife back to the room. After they left, Song took all his anger out on Lung Ruhan and continued to shout, That's my baby. He's a child of our Lung family. Lung Ruhan reminded, Mine. It's mine. When Azure heard that, he shouted shamelessly. When Lung Ruhan heard this, she ignored it. However, the debate about who the baby was never stopped. Especially after Lung Qingtian and the others returned, the situation had become more and more intense. Hearing that it was related to the child's ownership, Lung Qingtian naturally emphasized that it was his great-grandson and belonged to the Lung family. You're from the Lung family. Uncle Long laughed evilly. What do you think the mistress of the Dark World is? The Dark Lord? He's my grandson-in-law. More importantly, he's married to my granddaughter, so his child naturally belongs to us. Little brat ye, right? At the end of his sentence, he looked at the evildoer and said, That's right. If Grandpa likes it, then go ahead and take it. The demon said without a care. He couldn't ask for more when someone was willing to help him take care of his child. In fact, he was in a dilemma about this child that was about to be born. He was looking forward to it, but he was also a little afraid. He was looking forward to it because it was his child, but he was afraid that the little child would come and snatch his wife away from him. That was absolutely not allowed. Therefore, the evildoer would rather leave the child to his grandfather and brother-in-law before he was born. Only then would his status be guaranteed. After hearing the demon's words, Lung Qingtian was satisfied. However, Uncle Long and the rest had looks of disappointment on their faces. It would be good if elder sister gave birth to a few more. Facing the crowd who were arguing endlessly, Green Vessel suddenly sighed. Thanks, one for me, one for Tsong, one for grandfather, one for Brother Ruhan, and Uncle Long and the rest. Qingju counted with his little fingers. He then became vexed and said gloomily, Sister, if we count it this way, you'll have to give birth to a lot. A lot your head. Do you think I'm a sow? Seeing Qingju's serious and troubled expression, Lung Ruoxue was a little frustrated. That's right, it's enough to have one. The evildoer also glared at Qingju. At this moment, Qingju realized that he had said the wrong thing. Sob, the evildoer's expression was so scary. Qingju cowered in fear, but Lung Qingtian found Qingju's words very interesting. He teased, Little Qingju, you're just a little boy and you still want a child? Can you? Of course, I'm the one who's taking care of all those little kids in the space. Qingju said as he nodded his head. Silly boy, those in the space are all elves. They're different from the little dolls with flesh and blood. The little dolls are soft and hard to take care of. Uncle Long said with a smile. Since it's not easy, why are you guys fighting for it? Qingju was suspicious. Wasn't this self-contradictory? Is that the same? This is Shui Er's child, the true next generation among us, and also the inheritor of the divine world and the 9 Nether prison. Therefore, he is the most important person. Lung Qingtian explained with a smile. Of course, what he didn't say was that Shui Er's child was related to him by blood. It was fine to just take this matter to heart. If word got out, it would cause others to be jealous. Yes, of course, sister's child is important. So, I have to take one with me. Qingju nodded. You're just a little baby. After hearing what Qingju said, everyone laughed and said, Arg, my stomach hurts. Just as everyone was chatting and laughing, Lung Ruox's expression suddenly changed. Then, she cried out in shock and grabbed the demon who was sitting beside her. The moment the demon saw her, he hurriedly asked, Where do you feel uncomfortable? I'll check it for you. He had never seen Shui Er in so much pain. Seeing Shui Er's pale face, his entire heart clenched. P&D N01. Ko. And when Green Vessel saw this, it immediately moved everyone into the bracelet. After entering the bangle, the evildoer carried Lung Ruoxue into the purple bamboo house. The others wanted to go in and see if there was anything they could help with, but they were stopped by a barrier. No one is allowed to come in. The demon's voice came from the purple bamboo house. After saying this, the evildoer turned his attention to Shui Er and looked at Lung Ruox's condition. He knew that the child would not be born yet. Shui Er, breathe. Let's take a deep breath. Seeing that Shui Er was in so much pain, the evil demon's heart ached and wanted to distract her. I've been breathing, but it really hurts. When Lung Ruoxue said this, she was extremely depressed. As a god, how much pain had she not experienced? However, that pain was nothing compared to giving birth. Lung Ruoxue had decided that if the children dared to be unfilial to her after they were born, she would throw them into the chaotic world so that she wouldn't have to worry about them. However, just as she thought this, she felt wronged and said, Well, definitely be filial to mom. Feeling the children's encouragement and heartache, Lung Ruoxue instantly felt much better. Her stomach didn't seem to hurt as much anymore. However, the pain was intermittent. Every time she felt relief, the pain would come again. This repeated for a long time. Lung Qingtian and the others, who were blocked outside the purple bamboo house, saw that Shui Er had been inside for more than 10 hours and still had not given birth to the child. They couldn't help but feel anxious. Madam, hurry up and give birth. May God bless us. Ji Kai, who was mixed in with the crowd, mumbled. Chapter 3063. The first meeting between the son and the father. 1. When Lung Qingtian and the others, who were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, heard Ji Kai's words, they were stunned for a moment before they realized what he had said. They slapped Ji Kai's head and shouted in unison, Pray for God's blessing? Which God do you want to pray to? Didn't they know that they were gods? Asking for God's blessing in front of them. In the eyes of the crowd, those who could be blessed were all in the purple bamboo house. Who else would dare to join in the fun? Ji Kai looked at everyone's reaction and was stunned. Did he say something wrong? Whoa, I didn't seem to have said anything. But why was he beaten up? For a moment, he was a little dazed from the beating and couldn't react at all. He stared at Lung Qingtian and the others with wide eyes, his face full of grievance. When everyone saw this, they were amused. This little guy was feeling wronged? Brat, don't you know that we are gods? Lung Qingtian could not help but shout. He had forgotten. Ji Kai was a little frightened, and his face turned pale. He didn't dare to say anything. Forget it. Don't scare this little fool. Uncle Long couldn't bear to see it. Little fool? Ji Kai suddenly understood. So, in everyone's eyes, he was a fool? Sob. This truth almost made Ji Kai cry. However, before he could complain, he heard a loud slap coming from inside the purple bamboo house. He was shocked. Who was this? Immediately after, a baby's cry that was louder than a palm came from inside. When everyone heard it, they froze for a moment before they could not help but cheer. She gave birth, she gave birth. She finally gave birth. Knowing that the child was finally born safely, everyone present was so happy that they couldn't even find the north. Unfortunately, no matter how anxious they were outside, no one came out of the purple bamboo house. What was going on? Everyone was very anxious. However, if the people inside didn't come out, they wouldn't be able to get in, let alone force their way in. After the excitement, the people who didn't know the truth couldn't help but start to worry again. At this moment, Ji-kai couldn't help but think, the slap just now was so loud. Was he hitting a child? Thinking of Zyobei's tender little, but he felt pain for his baby. Master was definitely ruthless. Why was he so sure that his master was the one who did it? Because he knew very well that Madam couldn't bear to hit the child. The truth proved that Ji-kai was telling the truth. That slap was indeed from a demon. At this moment, after the evildoer slapped little babes but a few times, he stared at the chubby baby in his hands. The demon felt that it was very magical. This little meat bun was his. He glanced at the space between the little boy's legs. Oh, it was his son. A son. Thanks in the beginning, the demon was still very calm. But then he remembered that this was his son. You bastard. How could it be his son? Yes. The demon had always hoped that the child in his wife's stomach would be as cute as Shue, but now things didn't go his way. What should he do? Can you stuff it back? It had to be said that the evildoer was a little silly. As if he could feel his father's dissatisfaction with him, the little meat bun, who had just been born, only pouted his pink and tender little mouth lightly, and then burst into tears again. Mother, where's Mom? He wanted his mother. Before he was born, his mother often conversed with him, so the little meat bun knew that his mother was a very, very gentle and good mother. As for the annoying man who was hugging him now, he also knew that he was probably his father. However, the baby was very sensitive and knew that his father did not like him. It didn't matter. He didn't like this annoying father who might snatch his mother away from him. Just like that, the father and the son became enemies the first time they met, and they hated each other. How could he be the son of God? It was just born, but it could already think so much and think so far. If it were an ordinary human baby, it would probably not have opened its eyes at this moment. However, the child of the evildoer and Lung Ruoxue could even stare at his own father. If a son could sense his father's dissatisfaction, how can mother not? When Lung Ruoxue received her son for the evildoer, she had already conjured a small warm water ball in her hand to clean the child's body. The child was very satisfied. His biological mother was still the best. This was a real mother. His father must be the second. The little child still couldn't speak, so the demon didn't know what his fresh out of the oven, still exhaling hot air son was thinking. Otherwise, he might have directly thrown away this annoying bear child like garbage. After washing and wrapping the doll, Lung Ruoxue quickly placed the child at the side and said to the demon, "Hubby, I'm going to give birth again." What? There are more? The demon's eyes widened, and his reaction was obviously half a beat slower. But fortunately, he was a god. When he heard that his wife was going to give birth again, he quickly made preparations. The second baby came out only half an hour later than the first one. After it was born, the demon slapped the baby's little but a few more times. When the baby cried, he took a look and saw that it was a ghost. It was actually another son. How could this be? The demon was so depressed. If it was a daughter, he could still reluctantly accept it. But why was it a son? The child was still cleaned by his biological mother, Lung Ruoxue. After washing and wrapping it up, the demon thought that everything was over. However, Lung Ruoxue stammered as she told him, "Hubby, we still have one more. There are more." Upon hearing this, the evildoer wished he could just faint. He stared at his wife's still bulging stomach with a pale face. I really want to scratch the wall. If she had another son. Looking at the demon's conflicted expression, Lung Ruoxue did not know if she should tell him now that the next one would still be her son. However, before she could tell the truth, the child in her belly was clearly getting impatient and anxious. Seeing that his wife's stomach was in pain again, the evildoer quickly held her hand and said, "Shwekar, if it hurts, then shout out. I can hold on." Having two children in a row, Lung Roashue had to hold back her screams. It was not that she did not want to, but when she thought about how many people were guarding outside the purple bamboo house, she really did not have the courage to scream. Fortunately, after the three children had been brewing for a long time, they came out relatively quickly. So, in less than an hour, the third child came out to meet his parents. Seeing that it was another son, the evildoer obviously did not have any hope. Chapter 3064. The first meeting between the son and the father. 2. I heard that a son is a wife's lover in her past life. He had 3 love rivals at once. What else could he say? After the same process, his devilishly handsome face was drenched in sweat. However, he still looked at his wife nervously and asked with a bitter face, "Honey, is there more?" "No," Lung Roashua promised. The demon heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that. If there were more, and it was a son again, he would go crazy. However, the moment he relaxed, the demon felt his vision turn black, and then he didn't know anything. The moment Lung Roashua saw that the evildoer had fainted, she cried out in shock, "Freak!" When the crowd outside the purple bamboo house heard Lung Roashua's cry, they were extremely nervous, as they did not know what was going on inside. However, no one dared to barge in rashly. They could not bear the anger of the mistress of the dark world. Everyone was secretly guessing the situation inside. What they were most curious about was how many little babies were born. Although they had heard the baby cry 3 times, they didn't dare to think that there would be 3 children. What if it was one child crying? At this moment, the door of the purple bamboo house was opened. The crowd hesitated for a moment before finally looking at Lung Qingtian. Lung Qingtian was very depressed. The door was already open, so they could enter if they wanted to. Why were they looking at him? Did flowers grow on his face? In reality, Lung Qingtian was well aware of everyone's thoughts. They wanted him to stand out. However, when she thought of his devilish temper, she had to admit that he was terrified. "Grandpa, you guys can come in." It was only when Lung Roashua's voice came from inside the house that Lung Qingtian was the first to step in. The crowd followed. At this moment in the house, even though the blood had been cleaned by Lung Roashua, everyone could still smell the faint smell of blood. However, what surprised everyone was that the pale Shue did not faint. So, why did the demon faint first? Everyone looked at each other, but none of them asked. However, Sanka didn't care about that and laughed in disdain. "Useless. He fainted just like that. I'm all so tired." Hearing Tsang's words, Lung Roashua was smart enough to pretend she didn't hear anything and fell asleep in peace. Seeing that the two of them were exhausted, Lung Qingtian considerately covered them with a blanket before turning his gaze to the little doll beside them. As expected, there were 3 of them. Lung Qingtian was overjoyed. Just as he was about to reach out to hold the child, someone was faster than him and picked up a little doll. Looking at the person who was ahead of him, Lung Qingshan's mouth twitched. Because the first one to carry a child was none other than Tsang. Lung Qingtian was worried when he saw Tsang standing up straight and hugging the baby, who was almost twice its size with its 2 furry little claws. I really don't understand how Senior Tsang could carry a child. What if he dropped the doll? However, it was obvious that Lung Qingtian was overthinking it. Tsang was holding the little baby firmly. Just as Lung Qingshan's thoughts were running wild, the other 2 children had also fallen into the hands of others. One of them was snatched away by the quick-witted Lung Ruhan, while the other one fell into Uncle Long's hands. Those who managed to grab it were naturally all smiles, while those who were a step slower were all unhappy, especially Lung Qingtian, who kept shooting daggers at Lung Ruhan. The meaning in his eyes was self-evident, but Lung Ruhan did not seem to see it. She still held the child tightly and did not let go. Uncle Long was the same. In order to have the little boy to himself, he even ran to the outside of the purple bamboo house. Azure. No one dared to snatch food from its claws. The 3 children were not shy with strangers at all. They looked at the person who was holding them and all giggled. The three people who snatched the child away liked the chubby and fair child the more they looked at him. Lung Qingtian and the others could only glare daggers at them, wishing they could hack the three smug fellows into 1,000 pieces. He really hated people too much, didn't he? However, among the three who snatched the child, 2 of them were tactful. They didn't dare to keep the child for too long and handed the child over to someone else. Otherwise, they would probably cause public anger. Now, everyone had the opportunity to get close to the little child, and their mood was instantly beautiful. But there was still one person who didn't feel beautiful, and that was Ji Kai. With so many people lining up to hold little master, when would it be his turn? Ji Kai's heart was filled with resentment. Suddenly, a child started wailing. After the first one, the other 2 also began to cry. When everyone heard the crying, they immediately became a little flustered. The people present were basically all men, and many of them did not have any experience in taking care of a baby. The moment they heard that the baby was crying, their hearts instantly clenched. It was a pity that they did not know what exactly had happened to little babe. After thinking for a while, everyone was shocked to realize that these 3 little babe were hungry. That's right. Sensing that everyone had thought of this, the 3 little children felt quite gratified. They were hungry. I'm so hungry. When she was in her mother's stomach, she still had spiritual energy to eat. But now, she had nothing to eat. Feeling wronged, the 3 little meat buns pouted their pink and tender little mouths in unison, acting cute and coquettish. Everyone's heart softened when they saw this. Eggshell. The babies would grow up after eating the eggshells. They'll go get their eggshells for them to eat. Feng Zhan, who was flying in the air, suddenly had an idea. Upon hearing this, everyone fell silent. Lung Qingtian could not help but sigh. Feng Zhan, they don't have any eggshells. Why isn't there an eggshell? Where's the eggshell? Who ate it? Feng Zhan was very angry. He flapped his wings and wanted to find the guy who had stolen the eggshells of the 3 little shellfish to settle the score. You bastard! How audacious of him to eat his child's eggshell. Do you still want to live? Baisu couldn't help but cover his face. Idiot and idiot! Did they think that humans were the same as beasts? Baisu, who obviously didn't want to be stupid like Feng Zhan, stretched out a claw and jumped into the air, smacking the flying Feng Zhan down. He growled, "These 3 little meat buns are humans. Humans don't have eggshells, okay. Like this." Feng Zhan blinked and blinked again. He could clearly feel the heat on his face. He was shy. Then what do human babies eat? After a moment of shyness, Feng Zhan, who was not ashamed to ask, continued to ask. Human babies drink milk. Lung Qingtian said softly. They'll go find him. After Feng Zhan finished speaking, he immediately flew away. Everyone was very curious. Where did that little Feng Zhan find milk for the baby? Just as they were thinking this, they heard the roars of the female beast from the phoenix forest in the distance. Then, there was a huge commotion. Everyone couldn't help but cover their faces. Speaking of which, could they say that they didn't know this guy who suddenly acted like an idiot? It was really too embarrassing. Chapter 3065. The first meeting between the son and the father. 3. When Feng Zhan reappeared in front of everyone, his beautiful feathers were already in a mess. When the crowd saw this, they held back their questions. Did you encounter a lady? It was obvious that Feng Zhan wasn't in a good mood. He hung his head and said dejectedly, Those female beasts are really too fierce. So what if there's no milk? Why did you hit me? In the Prince of the Phoenix clan, how can you not give me any face? I'd be a fool to give you face. Everyone couldn't help but mutter to themselves. Although there were many female beasts in the Phoenix Forest now, most of them had yet to form families. He had foolishly asked for milk to feed his babies. It would be a waste if he didn't get angry at him. Has Master not woken up yet? At this moment, a few beautiful women walked over from the direction of the Phoenix Forest. The moment Feng Zhan saw them, he immediately hid behind Uncle Long to seek shelter. Woo! Women are tigers. Other than Master, why is there no woman in this world who is gentle and cute? Feng Zhan was very worried. One of the women rolled her eyes at Feng Zhan and walked over to the 3 baby girls. She looked at the fair and tender little children with joy, then took out a few red spirit fruits and handed them to Lung Ruhan. Let the baby eat this first. Lung Ruhan took the spirit fruit. She hesitated for a moment before squeezing out a little juice and feeding it to the baby. The spirit fruit was rich in spirit energy, and the little babe that he was carrying obviously liked it very much. It pouted its little mouth and sniffed it. When the others saw this, they did the same. The little baby's first meal in this world was finally settled. When Lung Ruashua woke up, the demon had already woken up and was staring at her intently. How do you feel? Does it still hurt? The evil demon asked with heartache. It's been hard on my wife. It doesn't hurt anymore, Lung Ruashua said with a face full of happiness. Before she fell asleep, she had taken a pill and was basically fine now. Then, she turned around to look at the baby, but she found that there was no one on the bed. Where are the children? Lung Ruashua could not help but ask. I don't know, the demon said irresponsibly. After he woke up, he had put all his attention on his wife and had not thought about the child at all. If Shui had not asked him now, he would probably not have thought about the child. Lung Ruakshu's face darkened. You're a father. The child was gone, and they didn't even know where it went. Of course, the child would not be lost. The speechless Lung Ruashua was at her wit's end. After releasing her divine sense and knowing that her baby was being taken care of by her grandfather and the others, she was relieved. At this moment, the demon remembered that he wanted to settle the score after autumn. What accounts? Of course, it was a matter of the number of children. He only wanted 1, but now there were 3, which obviously exceeded his expectations. You bastard! He felt that even one of them would be enough to snatch his wife away. But now there were 3 of them. The evildoer's face was black as he said resentfully, why didn't you tell me that you had 3 babies? It's not too late to know now. Of course, I wanted to give you a surprise. Lung Ruashua looked at the evildoer guiltily as she tried to please him. I'm surprised, but not happy, the demon said, not giving him any face. Lung Ruakshu's face darkened again. She couldn't help but remind him, Demon, that's your child. I know, but back then, I only wanted 1. The demon said confidently. It was because he knew this that he didn't dare to say it. Lung Ruashu sighed inwardly, but her beautiful face was still full of smiles as she said, Isn't 3 better? It was in place in 1 shot. There's no need to have another child in the future. Even if there's only 1, I don't plan to have another one in the future. He peeked at Lung Ruashua arrogantly. All right, you win, but now that it's already born, we can't just stuff it back in, right? Lung Ruashua said helplessly. You think I don't want to stuff the extra 2 back? The demon raised his eyebrows. The extra 2. How hurtful would this child be to have such an idea? This was his biological father. Lung Ruashua couldn't help but suck in her stomach. Just as she was about to change the topic, she saw her grandfather, elder brother, and Song walk in with 3 little children in their arms. Lung Ruashua was excited. A child. She hadn't even taken a good look at her baby. After receiving a little babe, Lung Ruashua placed it in the arms of the evildoer. Her intention was clear. She wanted the father and son to bond with each other. Although the demon was a little unwilling, he still gave Lung Ruashua a face and planned to coax the child. Unfortunately, Xiaobei did not give him any face as a father. As soon as he carried the child started to cry loudly. With one of them taking the lead, the other 2 followed suit and cried, I don't want a stepfather hug. The 3 little babes' thoughts were very intense. While the demon was thinking, as expected, his son was here to jinx his father. She was really not cute at all. Chapter 3066. The Full Moon 1. With his soft and unadorable son in his arms, the demon wanted to cry. Who could tell him how to shut this noisy little thing up? Schwetter had just given birth and needed a rest. If he cried like this, he would disturb her rest. The demon was very dissatisfied. The son he was carrying was also not very satisfied. He kept kicking his legs hard, trying to escape from the arms of his stepfather. However, he was small and weak. After struggling a few times, he still could not escape. When Lung Qingtian saw this, he chuckled and said, "Look at this little guy, so energetic. What a cute little thing." As a great-grandfather, he was very satisfied, but at this time, as a father, he suddenly felt at a loss. Shwe, this brat seems to have peed. Lung Ruoxue was a little surprised and hurriedly carried little babe over. At the same time, she saw that there was a wet patch on the evildoer's pants. This made her feel extremely puzzled. It shouldn't be. She had clearly put on baby underwear for the child. But when he pulled open little babe's little pants to take a look, he really peed. What made her even more surprised was that babe did not pee on her underwear, but on the outside. Ugh! Lung Ruoxue didn't really know what to say anymore. However, she would never have thought that little babe did it on purpose. After all, such a young child, even if he had the bloodline of a god, it was impossible for him to have so many thoughts when he was just born, right? But in reality, little babe really did it on purpose. This could also be considered as giving his stepfather a chance to show off his might. However, a child was still a child. Who would care about such a display of power? The first round of PK between the son and the father was considered a draw. Of course, this was also because the evildoer was letting the child have his way. After all, the child was still young, so he did not argue with the child. After Lung Ruoxue cleaned up the child, she decided to feed little babe. Lung Qingtian and Lung Ruhan naturally left tactfully. Song, he didn't plan to leave at first, but he was thrown out by the demon. After the crowd was cleared, Lung Ruoxue looked at the demon without saying a word. The moment the demon saw her, he couldn't help but say aggrievedly, "Shwe, you're not thinking of driving me away, are you? You should also leave." With a demon around, Lung Ruoxue would feel shy. With what? I'm your husband. The demon was not willing to leave. He wanted to stay here and monitor these brats so that they wouldn't take advantage of his wife. "They'll be embarrassed if you stay here," Lung Ruoxue said honestly. When the demon heard this, he laughed happily and said with a little pride, "What are you shy about? It's not like I haven't seen it before. Which part of your body isn't mine?" Hearing the demon's words, Lung Ruoxue had no choice but to compromise. However, when Lung Ruoxue started feeding Xiaobei, the demon regretted it. He really shouldn't be here. Woo! Seeing a man taking advantage of his wife with his own eyes, it was really glaring no matter how he looked at it. He really wanted to break the feeling of throwing that stinky brat away, even if that brat was his own son. Just like that, under the demon's intense and covetous gaze, the three little babe endured the great pressure and bravely finished their first breast milk. After that, the evildoer threw the three little babes to Lung Qingtian, Lung Ruhan, and Xan. Half a month later, the demon wanted to wean his son. However, Lung Ruoxue did not agree. After all, the child was still young. Because of this, the couple was in a deadlock. The demon was so angry that he ignored Shwe for a few days. For a time, whether it was in the bracelet or in the villa, the low air pressure and cold current made people shiver. It could be seen that the mistress of the dark world was furious, and the unlucky ones were the small characters like them. In the end, it was Lung Ruoxue who stepped in to settle the matter, and she could only fight for half a month's welfare for her three sons. In other words, after her sons were 1 month old, she would have to stop breastfeeding them. Although Lung Ruoxue felt that she was mistreating her son, she thought about it carefully. Her son was being raised by another woman, and her husband was her husband. Thus she felt at ease. After all, her husband was the one who would accompany her for the rest of her life, and he was the most important person. In this matter, the evildoer had won the final victory. This was enough to prove that although his wife had a son, she still loved him the most. Therefore, he was satisfied. In terms of the important position in his wife's heart, the evildoer was completely superior. After solving the problem of the three little bees' meals, the matter of giving the children names was brought up to the agenda again. Logically speaking, little babe's name should have been thought of before she was born, but at that time, no one knew when the baby would be born, so they were not in a hurry. After Shue's stomach had gotten bigger, all of their attention had been on Shue, so they had completely forgotten about the matter of naming. After the child was born, because of the problem of little babe's food, Shue and the demon had a mutual opinion. As a result, the name of the child was delayed again. Now, it was finally time to give the child a name. When everyone asked for the demon's opinion, he, as the father, said very irresponsibly, "Anything. You can call me whatever you want." Everyone was stunned. How could he be a father like this? He was really irresponsible. That was his own son. After hearing the demon's words, everyone's disapproving eyes swept over the demon, but he didn't care at all. According to his thoughts, what kind of name was that? He could wait for the child to grow up and take it himself. It was because he was born without a name. In this aspect, it was rare for Azure to stand on evildoer's side and speak his mind. He'll let Xiaobei choose her own name in the future. Everyone disagreed. At this moment, the demon spoke again. Everyone here was named by your own parents? Uncle Long, did your parents give you your name? The demon asked calmly. I've never seen what my parents look like. After a pause, Uncle Long had no choice but to tell the truth. All right, this one was probably born from the heavens and earth. Everyone was helpless, but human babies were different from beast babies. Human babies couldn't grow up on their own and had to be taken care of by adults when they were just born. But beast babies were different. Other people's babies could speak when they were born and could support themselves. It was not that everyone did not understand this logic, but he couldn't accept it. From this, it could be seen that human babies were still lacking in self-care ability compared to divine beast babies. No, it can't be compared like this. Unfortunately, the truth was right in front of them, and no one knew how to refute it. After a long period of silence, as Lung Ruoxu's biological grandfather and little babe's great-grandfather, Lung Qingtian had no choice but to speak. Everyone. Lung Qingtian had just said 2 words, but he didn't know how to continue. Saying that these 3 little bais couldn't be compared to anyone else. Wasn't that just drawing hatred? He didn't dare to say this. Chapter 3067. The Full Moon 2. Seeing him hesitating, the demon continued. He's just a kid. Therefore, I think that we should first train the 3 of them to take care of themselves. Otherwise, it will be terrible if they are raised as 3 good-for-nothing young masters in the future. The meaning of his words was very obvious. He was just short of directly saying that he would let the 3 children live and die on their own. When everyone heard this, they could not accept this. The 3 little babe were their hearts and souls. As their father, you might not feel heartache, but they did. The demon knew from everyone's expression that his words had angered them again. But he really thought so. Back then, when he was just born, didn't he rely on himself? If he could survive, why couldn't his children? It could be seen that he was not a father who would dote on his child. Of course, part of it was because he didn't like his child snatching his wife away from him. But he also sincerely hoped that his child could be independent as soon as possible and surpass his master. Therefore, he still had high hopes for his own child. What do you think about sending the child to the chaotic world? The demon continued. Not much. The child wasn't even a month old yet. There was no one there. If he was really sent there, not to mention whether his small body could withstand the violent spiritual energy in the chaotic world, even survival would be a problem. Although they also hoped that the child would be successful in the future, the child was still young. They couldn't bear to send Xiaobei to live in a desolate place at such a young age. This was really too much of a scam. You can't be a father like this. Was this still his biological father? The demon saw that no one was saying anything, but their expressions weren't too good. He knew that they wouldn't agree. In fact, he didn't expect them to agree with his decision now, but one day in the future, he would definitely send his children there to train. At that time, it would be useless no matter who disagreed. The reason why evildoer asked for their opinions was because everyone present was Shue's elder. Therefore, he respected them very much. Moreover, the child was indeed a little young now, so he did not force her. As for the child's name, he really didn't care much about it. After that, Long Qingtian asked for Shui Er's opinion and decided that 2 of the 3 children would take their father's surname, Yi, and 1 would take their mother's surname, Long. The demon had no objections to this. After deciding on the child's surname, Long Qingtian and the rest decided on the child's name themselves. As for Lung Ruoxue and the demon, one of them was focused on her confinement, while the other was focused on serving her wife. Initially, based on Lung Ruoxue's physical condition, she felt that she was already fine. She had even used her divine power to repair her body. However, the demon insisted on making her lie in bed for a month, and even said that all normal humans were like this. Lung Ruoxue was really helpless about this. The evildoer now did not treat the 3 little shells as ordinary human children, but as ordinary human women. Sigh. Although she was helpless, she still obediently stayed in bed to rest in order not to hurt her husband's good intentions. Other than feeding little babe, Lung Ruoxue spent most of her time alone with the demon. However, the truth was that she missed her child. She wanted to get closer to the child, but the evildoer said that she couldn't let the child develop the habit of sticking to her mother. It was not good for the child's growth. Hearing this, Lung Ruoxue really wanted to ridicule him. How is sticking to the mother bad for the child's growth? You're still sticking to your wife. Why didn't you say so? Although Lung Ruoxue understood that the evildoer wanted the child to be independent as soon as possible, the child had only been born for half a month. Wasn't it too cruel to leave her mother at such a young age? Moreover, Lung Ruoxue only wanted to be close to the child. She wouldn't really dote on the child, so why couldn't she? However, she also knew that now was not the time to argue with the evildoer over this matter. She had to wait until she was done with her confinement. Lung Ruoxue made up her mind that once she was allowed to get off the bed, she would definitely go play with her child. She was now under the control of her husband and had no choice. On this side, Lung Ruoxue was fighting with the evildoer. On the other side, Lung Qingtian and the others were also quarreling over the child's name. The cause of the matter was very simple. Everyone thought of a name for the baby and felt that they were the best. They all wanted to use their own names. As such, no one was willing to give in to the other. Just like that, everyone was in a deadlock because of the name. Even after Lung Ruoxue was done with her confinement and Xiao Bei was a full moon, no one could come to a consensus on the name. Lung Ruoxue knew that this was not going to work. He had no choice but to go out personally and choose 3 names from the many names. The eldest and the second were named Yi Ruixing and Yi Rui's respectively. The other baby was named Lung Ruichen. Among the 3 babies, Rui Shang had a calm personality and was very much like an elder brother. Rui Zi was a little black-bellied and had the most devilish personality. Only the third, Rui Yu, was heartless and a complete little foodie. As long as he had food to eat, he would be satisfied. And among the 3 little babe Bai, Lung Ruoxue doted on third the most. Who asked this child to be so simple-minded? Lung Ruoxue didn't want to hold a 1-month-old celebration for her child, but seeing that her grandfather and the rest were all in high spirits and had long been preparing for the 1-month-old celebration, she didn't dare to dampen their spirits. Although there were no outsiders present at the full moon banquet, everyone was still in high spirits. The 3 little babe Bai were being carried by Lung Qingtian, Lung Rehan, and Tsang, and they were all laughing. Looking at such an adorable child, Lung Ruoxue was content with having a child. The highlight of the full moon banquet was the capture of Zhou that everyone had prepared. Logically speaking, according to the habits of an ordinary person, they would only catch their babies when they were 1 year old. However, Lung Ruoxue's 3 babies had the bloodline of God. Needless to say, they were naturally gifted. They could sit up after being born a few days ago, and they could even crawl now. Therefore, they would naturally not grow up slowly like ordinary babies. It was the first time that they had held a ceremony for their children. Most importantly, they did not do it like ordinary people. They did not want to see what their children liked or what they wanted to develop in the future. They did it for someone to be the child's godfather. When Lung Ruoxue heard their motive, she was in a complete mess. Looking at Uncle Long, Lung Ruoxue wiped away her cold sweat and said, "Uncle Long," am already calling you uncle, and you still want to be my child's godfather? And Qingju and Fengzhan, are you sure you can be fathers? Lung Ruoxua looked at the little baby and little beast that she had called out and was speechless. Sister, why can't I be a father? Qingju was not convinced. You're still a little baby. Besides, if you call me sister, you'll be the child's uncle. How can you be the child's godfather? Lung Ruoxua reminded. So I'm the child's uncle? Then I want to be your godfather. Qingju immediately gave up when he heard that. He originally wanted to have a closer relationship with Xiaobei, but he didn't expect that he was her uncle. Then why was he fighting for a godfather? Master, I'm already an adult. Why can't I be a godfather? Well, Master just doesn't like me. After dealing with Qingju, it was Fengzhan's turn to feel wronged. You're really old? Why do I always feel that you're still young? Lung Ruoxua blinked her eyes and asked in disbelief. Ha ha ha. When everyone heard Lung Ruoxua's words, they couldn't help but burst out laughing. When they were done laughing, Uncle Long said, I'm not going to be a godfather. I'm going to be a godfather. Well, we're just trying to catch Joe for fun. So, you don't have to worry about it. It's not certain whether we'll catch the child or not. At this moment, Lung Qingtian also spoke. After taking care of the children for so long, he knew how good the three children's ideas were. All right then. Hearing her grandfather's words, Lung Ruoxua was at her wit's end. It could be lively if he wanted to, and the moment of the capture of the Zhou was really not the usual kind of liveliness. After the capture of the week began, the first person to appear was naturally Lung Ruoxua's eldest son, Yiruashing. As soon as the baby appeared, he waved his meaty paws at the crowd in an imposing manner. Then, he looked down at the items around him. Needless to say, these things were carefully selected by everyone, and were also gifts for the little children. Little Rue Sheng looked around, and then looked at his mother. He firmly crawled toward his beautiful and fragrant mother, and hugged her thigh. He raised his little head, looking cute, and asking for a hug and caress. The moment Lung Ruoxua saw him, she couldn't resist, and immediately picked up her cute son. Little Ruashing gave his mother a loud and sweet kiss. At the same time, his devilish face darkened. Most of the people present were also unhappy. The little doll had no conscience. To think that they doted on him so much. He actually didn't give him any face at all. Seeing this, Lung Qingtian was secretly happy in his heart. As expected of the old Lung family's son. Well done. Not long after, it was Ruiza's turn. As soon as the little guy appeared, he first got close to the onlookers and gave them a sweet date, then climbed to his seat to choose his favorite gift. He picked up almost every present, but under everyone's expectant eyes, he slowly put them down again. Just like that, he kept picking up and putting them down. At the same time, his beautiful starry eyes would calmly sweep over the crowd. When he saw everyone's disappointed expressions, the little baby smiled happily. Seeing him like this, everyone couldn't help but gnash their teeth in hatred. This little thing was really a cunning little fox. He didn't know who trained him. Azure's face was filled with pride. Who trained him? Do I need to say more? Of course it was this. After Rue Z teased everyone present, he also directly crawled to his mother and played with her affectionately for a while. Then he crawled at Song's side and hugged Song's fluffy little body, unwilling to leave. Now, what else did everyone not understand? At the same time, everyone's sympathetic eyes swept towards the evildoer. This pitiful biological father. Did little babe not get close to him? However, the demon didn't care. After all, he was his son, so how could he run away from blood relations? From this, it could be seen that the genius was very confident. The last one to appear was Lung Ruoxua's most beloved Ruachin. When the little fellow came out, he was naturally different from his two brothers. He didn't get close to anyone, but climbed onto the table first, picked up the spirit fruit on the table, and started in awe. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.